Chapter 322. All the regiment commanders stood up from where they were sitting and returned to their teams with heroic postures. On the way back, they had already pulled out their weapons and shouted for their members to quickly gather around them to defend against the enemy. But when they returned to their teams, they only saw chaos in the crowd but no enemies. Where are they? Where are they? The group leaders rushed to ask their subordinates. They suddenly appeared, killed 2 people and ran away. Someone described. Why didn't we chase? The group leaders asked. We chased them. Everyone pointed in a certain direction. There, 3 players were alone in the bushes under a tree. Of course, they weren't posing there. They were trapped in a trap and couldn't move. However, the trap was nothing more than a harmless hunting trap. The expressions on the trio's faces were extremely exaggerated because the ground beneath their feet was still emitting sparks. 1,000-layered flames of the cinder tree. The group leaders, who were all experts, immediately recognized it. What happened? One of the group leaders asked. 4 thieves suddenly appeared, killed the 2 players in the outer circle, and immediately ran away. Everyone was in a hurry to chase them and accidentally fell into the trap. Then, we saw the mage's flames ignite. There were 8 people who chased after them, but now only 3 are left. The group leaders understood. No wonder the 3 who were standing there were all warriors. They survived because they had higher health. The other 5 who were sacrificed were probably classes with low health. At this time, the priest was maintaining his distance and healing the 3 warriors. The 3 of them were also nervously looking around, afraid that the flames would rise again. In the end, the enemy didn't attack or show up. They let the traps under the 3 warriors' feet expire and hurriedly returned to their teams. The forest returned to peace. The enemy had launched a wave of attacks in a short period of time, taking away the levels of 7 players from Cloud City. 4 of the 7 were members of Reigning the 4 Seas. They had already returned to the faraway Cloud City and quit this mission. The other 3 mercenary group members had also returned to White Stone City. It would take at least 3 hours for them to rush here. Everyone, be careful around you. Unsworn Sword shouted. Everyone waved their weapons in the air to see if there were any thieves approaching them. There were even mages who started a carpet bombing around them. After confirming that there were no more thieves, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Just because there wasn't one now didn't mean there wouldn't be one in the future. No matter how many people there were, they couldn't do anything about a thief's stealth. They couldn't just let the mages keep bombarding them with spells, right? Unsworn Sword gritted his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter. He said to Time's Reflection, "Find Qianli and get drunk." Currently, only this one was known to be able to perform anti-stealth. Gu Fei came forward again. Sword of No Oath's expression was one of respect. "Brother Qianli, I'll have to rely on you this time." Of course, Gu Fei knew what they wanted him to do. However, his methods had many limitations. At this moment, he sighed at Unsworn Sword and said, "Guild Leader Unsworn, I can only guard one direction at most. It's impossible for me to take care of everything." But Unsworn Sword asked, "My brother Zue knows Kung Fu, and he plays with killing intent." Fireball, who happened to be in the group, said smugly, "Who's causing trouble? Drag him away." Unsworn Sword called for 2 warriors to throw Fireball away. Seeing that no one believed him, Gu Fei racked his brain and changed the concept of an explanation. This is a passive skill. It will only react when the other party notices me. Let's take this for example. I'm standing in the middle of the crowd. If there are thieves in stealth outside, they won't be able to see me, and I won't know of their existence. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Oh. Everyone sighed. "You brat. You're revealing your secrets so easily." Time's Reflection thought to himself. He had even started to think about how to get rid of a person without paying attention to him. This seemed like a challenge. Time's Reflection pondered. If that's the case, as long as Brother Qianli occupies a higher position than us, won't he be noticed by people outside the circle? Unsworn Sword suddenly said, as expected of the leader of the number 1 guild in Cloud City. His level of intelligence was quite high. Gu Fei smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Leader Unsworn, Are you trying to make a circle with me as the center? Sorry, my skills range isn't that big. It's at most 10 meters. It's impossible to take care of over 1,000 people. If that's the case, you can't even take care of one side. Unsworn Sword's face was ashen. To be precise, it's like this. Gu Fei was regretful. He understood the situation at hand and was willing to do his part, but the problem was that there was nothing he could do. Just as everyone was feeling helpless, a sudden shout came from the side. Fuck, here they come again. Everyone turned around and saw 2 flashes of white light in the direction of the voice. Another 4 thieves approached in stealth. They suddenly appeared and quickly killed 2 people, then turned and ran. With the previous example, no one dared to give chase this time. The mage's spells, the archer's arrows, and other long-range attacks all chased after them. But these 4 thieves seemed to be very familiar with this line of work. After one attack, they quickly scattered in all directions. In just a few steps, they had already stepped behind a tree and disappeared. At this point, the mages and archers who were ready to attack had just gotten into position. They hadn't remembered their chant yet, and hadn't even drawn their arrows yet. Fuck! Just as everyone was feeling indignant about this, suddenly, a ring of fire flashed in the sky, and the ground also glowed and heated up. Ah! Everyone screamed and scattered in all directions. This was a large area of effect spell from the mages. The 1,000-man team was in a mess. Players collided with each other. When someone fell, someone else dared to step on them. Screams filled the entire forest. Unsworn Sword kept yelling, "Steady, steady, steady." As a result, a warrior who was dodging the spells happened to dodge into their small circle, which was not affected by the spells, and bumped into Unsworn Sword's back. Unsworn Sword almost bit his tongue off. He turned around and glared at them, but no one was in the mood to pay attention to him. They all looked at the situation in front of them in horror. The spells had already been activated, and there was a sea of fire all around. Some were directly killed by the spell attack, while others were heavily injured by their own people in the chaos. Wasn't that right? In order to avoid the sudden attack, many warriors used charge to dodge. This skill wasn't just used to attack. It was also used by warriors when they were dodging or running at high speed. But in the current chaotic situation, there was no guarantee that a charge would just happen to hit someone's butt. Some were directly pushed into the sea of fire, some were knocked into the depths of the forest and never came back. Most of them entered a stunned state and fell to the ground without any reaction. Many people suddenly felt pain in their feet while running, and they could no longer move. Seeing that they had fallen into a trap, they were all dumbfounded. Why is there a trap here too? Everyone didn't forget that the traps surrounded them while they were dodging, and in the end, some people still stepped into them. The child elite group had always been at the bottom of the team, so they were also in the periphery when they formed a team. And the sudden spell attack just now mainly touched the periphery, and their position was also rewarded by the spell attack. With the experience and skills of these elite fighters, it was not too difficult for them to dodge the attack. However, it was obvious that their panicked companions were much more terrifying than the wave of spells. The young master of the Han family was unfortunately knocked down by the warrior when he was trying to escape. Fortunately, the chance of being stunned didn't happen to him. Relying on his exquisite priest skills, he sat on the ground and endured the fire attack from the sky and the ground. Sword Demon and Yutian Shinming also quickly stepped in and dragged him out of the 1,000 layers of flames of the Sync Tree. If they didn't hurry up and pull him out, the possibility of him being trampled to death by his own people was much higher than being burned to death. As the 5-second duration of the 1,000 layers of flames of the Sync Tree ended, the flames gradually extinguished. Mage's fire spells usually wouldn't cause a fire in places like the forest, mainly because the fire started quickly and extinguished even faster. If it wasn't for the 5-second duration of the 1,000 layers of flames of the Sync Tree, the Skyfall Flaming Wheel alone would leave almost no burn marks. However, the 5 seconds of continuous burning did ignite some of the drier leaves on the ground, but after a few sparks, they were extinguished into a wisp of smoke. The players in the Cloud City were all covered in dust, and they were in a sorry state. Some people's panicked footsteps had yet to stop. Unsworn Sword was careful not to be knocked into as he continued to shout, "Calm down, all leaders, please manage your own party members." But mercenary groups at most had no more than 100 people. How could the difficulty of management compare to reigning the 4C's 750 people? At this moment, the most chaotic party was actually his reigning the 4C's. Even at this time, the leaders still didn't forget to look at Unsworn Sword with disdain. Gu Fei had already returned to find his companions. "Are you guys okay?" Everyone looked at the Han family young master. He was the one who almost died. The Han family young master, on the other hand, had a face full of regret as he looked at the debris where he fell. "It's a pity about that bottle of wine, I just took it out." "What's going on?" Gu Fei looked around. "There's a mage sneaking up to us. We didn't even notice a single one. These guys are very familiar with PK in the forest, and they're also very familiar with the terrain here," said the Han family young master. "We're in big trouble." Chapter 323. At this point, almost everyone had forgotten that they were here for a quest. In the face of disaster, everyone was thinking about how to get out of this dangerous situation. The Han family young master's prediction about this temporary army was gradually coming true. Deserters appeared in various mercenary groups, mainly thieves. After using stealth, they carefully moved out of the forest. As long as they didn't step into the traps, it wasn't difficult to escape. Unfortunately, the thieves who ran in all directions didn't know how to scream. Their figures were revealed, and they couldn't move an inch. In the end, they stepped into the traps. As for the mages who were hiding somewhere, they instantly activated their skills. Flames sprayed in all directions, killing the deserters one by one. Not only did these players die, they died in an awkward manner. The moment they stepped into the traps, their intention to escape was exposed. Dying one level was only temporary, but it was inevitable that they would be looked down upon. Many people had just revived in the White Stone Thieves Guild when they received a system notification that they had been kicked out of the mercenary group. The mercenary group leaders who had deserted were embarrassed. They felt that everyone was looking down on them. In reality, everyone was in danger. No one was in the mood to care about this. Under the leadership of Reflection Years, the mercenary groups and players from reigning the seas quickly stood in a large circle, with the warriors and priests at the outer perimeter. With the support of these two classes with high HP, it wasn't difficult for them to withstand the bombardment from the mages. At the same time, the results of the head count were quickly produced. Unsworn Sword's face was ashen. They had lost a total of 217 people in this short period of chaos. Among them, there were more than 100 from reigning. This was the most serious blow they had suffered so far. At this point, the number of reigning members who were still on the quest barely reached 600. The forest was silent again. Everyone held their breath and looked in front of them. With such organized defense, the enemy didn't have a chance to launch another sneak attack. However, this alone wasn't enough to satisfy the players of Cloud City. Right now, they needed to break out of the encirclement and escape. But in a situation where they didn't even know where the enemy was, they were at their wits' end. "Who is it? Show yourself if you have the guts." Unsworn Sword was obviously going crazy. Hee hee. A laugh came from the forest in response to Unsworn Sword. Everyone turned their heads to look in that direction. Reflection Years shouted anxiously, "Don't be careless. Keep your eyes on your own direction." Everyone suddenly turned their heads back. Some people even twisted their necks in a hurry. The pressure was too great, and their muscles were tense. "Who is it? Step forward and say something." Unsworn Sword roared. As a warrior, he also set an example and stood at the very edge of the circle. And at the absolute core of the circle was the corrupt Todd. Indeed, a person came out of the forest, but he was a little further away from everyone. The forest was dark, so his appearance could not be seen clearly, but he seemed to be smiling. At this moment, he raised his arms and waved to everyone, shouting, "Hello everyone. Shady Tree City welcomes everyone." Everyone gritted their teeth. Some of the players heard that the voice came from another direction. They really wanted to go over and see who it was, but they were afraid that it was just a distraction. So, they didn't dare to move. They kept a close eye on the area in front of them while listening to the conversation behind them. Who are you? As the chief of the dragons, Unsworn Sword needed to speak to the other party directly. Now that they were in this direction, the two of them faced each other from afar. The other party did not answer this question, but instead asked, "How does the trap taste?" It was undeniable that although it was the mages and rogues who caused direct damage to the players in Cloud City, it was the traps that played a leading role in this trap. Because of the existence of the trap net, everyone had to be careful with every step they took, and they had no choice but to become turtles in a jar. It's nothing. Unsworn Sword was full of resentment towards the traps and did not answer for a while. In the end, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka, the trap expert, overstepped his authority and answered for him. But after he said this, even his own people looked askance at him. It was nothing, but he trapped everyone here. Wasn't this lying through his teeth? The other party laughed and asked, "Your Excellency, you are?" Tsubasa Sakuratsuka had already jumped to Unsworn Sword's side when he spoke just now. At this time, he patted his chest and replied, "My name is Tsubasa Sakuratsuka, the #1 trap technician in Cloud City. If you have the guts, fight me one-on-one." Unfortunately, the name Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was more than cute, but it was not imposing at all. Although he said such a sentence very arrogantly, he immediately introduced himself, which dragged down the momentum of the whole sentence. The group of scoundrels in his group who never took their leader seriously immediately began to laugh at him. Haha, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka is showing off again. The person on the other side also laughed and said, "The #1 in Cloud City is so powerful? But I'm sorry, I'm the #1 trap technician in the parallel world." "For you," Tsubasa Sakuratsuka said. Water depth. The noise gradually became louder. Because this name was not ordinary, it was the symbol of one of the most powerful 5 rogues in the parallel world. Although many players completed their level increase during the match, and level 41 was not exclusive to the 5 rogues, from the experience ranking in the game, the top 5 on the overall ranking were still these 5 people. The archer in the top 5 of the overall ranking was naturally at the top of the archer experience ranking. If he changed his class to lurker, then it was not too much to call himself the #1 trap technician in the parallel world. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was obviously a little embarrassed and said, "High level doesn't mean good skills." This was no longer shouted, but said to the people around him. As a result, he was mercilessly laughed at by his group of brothers. "Give it up, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka. What do you mean by there's always a higher mountain? Remember to keep a low profile in the future." "All of you shut the fuck up," Tsubasa Sakuratsuka said angrily, then shouted at Water Depth. "Water Depth, right? Come and fight me one-on-one. Let's see who's the #1 trap technician in the parallel world. Hee, if you can walk up to me safe and sound, I'll admit that you're the #1 trap technician." Water Depth laughed. Water Depth was more than 30 meters away from them, so there must have been traps along the way for him to dare to show up so openly. Unsworn Sword was also aware of this, otherwise he would have found a few thieves to sneak over and take him down. However, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka's trap level was indeed not bad, and Water Depth's words were aren't these words a little too arrogant? Tsubasa Sakuratsuka voiced out Unsworn Sword's thoughts. "Then I'll give it a try." "Go ahead." Water Depth made an inviting gesture. "Hey, just you wait." Tsubasa Sakuratsuka looking around, and finally broke off a branch that was more than 2 meters long. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka held it with both hands and said coldly, "Then I'm coming." Water Depth had no choice but to invite him again. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka shouted, stuck the branch into the ground, and began to carefully look for traps with his butt in the air. Everyone fainted. This was really too wretched. Just by looking at this temperament, everyone had already come to a conclusion as to who was more suitable to be called #1. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka's skill was not fake. In just a moment he had already picked out 3 traps, some hidden under leaves, and some buried in the ground. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was very proud of himself, thinking that there was nothing more than this kind of trick in laying traps. How could this kind of insignificant skill stop me? This guy is so arrogant, There's probably something wrong with his head. As Tsubasa Sakuratsuka thought, he had already picked out the 5th trap. He threw the 5 traps in one place, preparing to use them as a disgrace card to humiliate Deep Sea. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka looked up. He had just walked 5 meters, and the first 2 meters didn't have any traps, but after 3 meters, he found 5 in a row. And this was only on the path that Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was walking on. He reckoned that there were definitely traps around him as well. Just how many spies did this guy bring? Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was about to continue exploring when the players in Cloud City behind him suddenly shouted, "Watch out!" Tsubasa Sakuratsuka turned around in confusion, only to see 2 thieves faintly appearing behind him. Fuck, how despicable! Tsubasa Sakuratsuka cursed. Ha! You only used the traps as traps, but aren't the ambushing thieves also traps? As the number 1 expert, your trap awareness is too shallow. Today, I'll teach you a lesson. Go back and think about it. Water Depth laughed. How despicable! None of the players in Cloud City expected something like this to happen. It was already too late to save him, unless someone or an attack could reach Tsubasa Sakuratsuka without any delay. And Cloud City just so happened to have such a person. Teleportation was a movement that didn't have time. A distance of 5 meters was just right. Just when the 2 thieves thought that they had succeeded, a black figure suddenly appeared behind them. This time, it was Waterdep's turn to shout, "Watch out." But all he saw was a huge V-shaped torch flash past, and the 2 thieves were instantly killed. Brother Zu, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was so excited that he was about to cry. This was what it meant to be a brother. Looking at his brothers, they were all smiling and enjoying his defeat, while casually knocking their arrows and preparing to do their best. How sad. Hurry up and go back. Gu Fei patted Tsubasa Sakuratsuka. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka also felt danger. At this moment, the ground was hot, and the top of his head was flashing. This was a sign that the sorcerer was about to act. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka hurriedly threw away the broken tree stick in his hand and ran back. But before the stick could fall to the ground, it was caught by Gu Fei. Chapter 324. Gu Fei quickly tested the hardness of the branch and was very satisfied. He immediately put the sword into his pocket, and with both hands on the wooden stick, he was immediately propped up in midair. The 1,000 layers flame of the cinder tree on the ground had already ignited, but because Gu Fei was in midair, he wasn't burned. Although the heavenly fire wheel in the sky hit his head, it wasn't a serious injury. As a mage, Gu Fei's mana was a disgrace, but his health was even more outstanding than other mages. He had a freakish equipment like Windchaser's Blessing. At this time, the crowd was already exclaiming, "Wow, you can do that?" As a result, Gu Fei's performance wasn't over yet. The moment he was in midair, he took out a long rope from his pocket. With a wave of his arm, the rope flew at a 45-degree angle toward the tree branch above, firmly entangling itself somewhere. At this time, the wooden stick that was temporarily supporting him was about to fall. Gu Fei just happened to abandon the wooden stick and swing with the rope. At the same time, he quickly climbed up the rope. Gu Fei knew that if he didn't grab the high point, he would definitely be thrown to the ground when the rope reached the lowest point. These few movements were extremely smooth. The crowd shouted again, "You can do that? Are you doing acrobatics?" Gu Fei was very unhappy as he swung in the air. Was this acrobatics? This was kung fu. There was an ancient saying that there were 18 types of martial arts. In fact, these 18 were imaginary. With the progress of the dynasties, there were different versions of these 18. But according to the overall classification, it was nothing more than projectile weapons, long weapons, short weapons, soft weapons, and plain weapons. These categories were further subdivided, and each could be classified into 18 types of weapons. So it was impossible to be proficient in everything. Moreover, strange weapons like the wolf-tooth mace, the primordial hammer, and the meteor hammer had never been studied by any martial arts practitioner. For example, bows and arrows were something that Gu Fei hadn't dabbled in at all. Let's not talk about that for now. Just the trick that Gu Fei was using right now was real kung fu. This was a lasso type of soft weapon. If you asked an acrobat to do 2 swings, it would definitely be more thrilling and beautiful than Gu Fei's, but when it came to swinging the rope around a tree, Gu Fei was more confident. Gu Fei's inner qualities were all there, but the crowd didn't know how to appreciate it. This made Gu Fei very depressed again. But whether it was kung fu or acrobatics, everyone present was stunned by Gu Fei's actions. Not only his own people but also the water 25 meters away. It was not until Gu Fei grabbed the rope and was about to fly in front of him that he came to his senses. If you wanted to be a great professional archer player, the most important thing was to never give people a chance to get close to you. Although Depp's class was a lurker, the characteristics of the class were still there. At this moment, he didn't want to stay and fight, so he turned around to hide behind a tree. As long as he could get out of his opponent's line of sight, Shui Shen was confident that he could shake off any pursuers. To use a vulgar expression, he had grown up in this forest and knew it very well. Unfortunately, Gu Fei wouldn't give him the chance. He pointed in the air and quickly chanted, "Wall of electricity, descend." The wall of electricity instantly gathered in front of Depp. If he was even half a beat slower, he would have crashed into it. By the time he stopped and turned around to take a detour, Gu Fei, who wasn't slow at all, had already flown to his side. Gu Fei slashed at his face with his sword, then followed up with a sweeping kick to try and take down Shui Mingshui. He didn't expect that at the critical moment, depth of water would suddenly jump forward, and this sweep actually missed. When Gu Fei used Kung Fu, he couldn't control how much damage he could deal, but it was extremely rare for him to miss. Depth actually dodged what he thought was a surefire hit, which surprised him. Gu Fei didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly chased after him. Depth's movement speed might be higher than his, but as long as the distance between the two of them was within 5 meters, Gu Fei wouldn't miss a second time. As he was planning, he suddenly felt a slight tremble under his feet. Gu Fei cursed in his heart and quickly retreated. "There's a trap here." Gu Fei instantly understood why Depth had dodged his kick. That guy wasn't trying to deal with it, but because he knew there was a trap here, he jumped to jump over it. In the end, he just happened to let Gu Fei's kick pass. Gu Fei dodged as soon as he touched the trap. His reaction speed had already reached the peak of perfection. Gu Fei reckoned that if this was a trap in real life, he probably wouldn't have triggered it with his quick reaction speed. After all, to trigger a trap required a certain amount of strength. Unfortunately, this was a game. Triggering a trap didn't have that many physical principles. No matter how much strength you had, it would activate as soon as you touched it. What's more, this trap that Tsubasa Sakuratsuka mentioned was even more ferocious. With a flick, it would jump up and clamp onto you. However, compared to the last time, Gu Fei was prepared. In the time it took for him to dodge backwards, he had already raised his sword and was much faster than the last time. Depth, who was preparing to escape, was known as the #1 trap technician in the parallel world. He was naturally skilled in traps. Just now, his ears had caught a light sound that sounded like a spring behind him, and he immediately knew that a trap had been triggered. Who else could it be other than Gu Fei chasing after him? He didn't expect this guy to fall for it so quickly. Depth was still thinking that his dodging the trap was too obvious and might have alerted someone. He didn't expect this guy to be fast, but his brain wasn't. As Deepwater thought this, he was overjoyed as he turned around to look. In the end, he heard the sound of the spring getting closer and closer, and saw something very familiar flying in front of him. Before Deepwater could even scream, there was a pa sound, ending the sound of the spring. Waha! Tsubasa Sakuratsuka had turned around to look at Gu Fei's movements as soon as he ran out of the spell's range. He was closer than the others and could see more clearly. At this time, he was almost rolling on the ground. He pointed at Depth and laughed wildly, as expected of the #1 trap technician. To be able to fucking clamp the trap on your nose, I admit that I'm not as good as you. Depth's face was already covered in tears. He couldn't help but cry uncontrollably. If anyone didn't believe him, they could take a clip and clamp it on their own nose. What made Depth even more angry was that he couldn't move. The trap didn't clamp onto his feet, but his nose. The effect of the trap was also to stop him from moving. Even he, the #1 trap technician, didn't know about this, because no one had ever thought that something like this would happen. This is a bug. Depth thought in grief and indignation. Gu Fei was also quite surprised that this happened. He originally wanted to throw the trap at Depth's head, but he didn't think that Depth would turn around and send his nose up. He didn't think that clamping his nose would have the same effect as clamping his feet. The trap would only fall off when the time limit was up. This was a system rule, a shameless rule that couldn't be changed by humans. Therefore, Depth could only let the trap hang on his nose. It looked very funny, and any self-respecting expert would want to die at this time. Thus, when Gu Fei approached him with the dark streamer sword in hand, he even hoped that Gu Fei would walk a little faster so that he could quickly kill him. But when Gu Fei walked up to him, he didn't rush to swing his sword. Instead, he reached into his pocket and searched for something. Could it be an even crueler tool? Depth was about to open his mouth to protest, but he saw that Gu Fei had already taken something out of his pocket. It was an apple, and he began to chomp down on it while asking, "How does it feel?" An extreme teleportation, a dual flame flash, and an extreme electric wall. This was Gu Fei's limit. At this time, he couldn't use any powerful skills. Deepwater had wanted to make that sound, but she didn't want her nose to be pinched, so the sound went off somewhere. Depth could only open his mouth and say, "You better kill me quickly," but it's useless. Even if you kill me, you won't be able to leave this forest, and I'll be back soon. Depth's too wasn't directed at Gu Fei. Think about it, the trap was buried in the ground, so there was a lot of mud on it. At this time, it was hanging on his nose and hanging in front of his mouth. When he opened his mouth, a lot of mud fell into his mouth, making the situation even more awkward. Gu Fei laughed. He ate half of the apple before throwing it away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a coil of rope, saying, "Why should I kill you?" As he said this, he suddenly waved his right arm, and the tip of his sword slashed out with a V-shaped flame. Two thieves appeared out of thin air, dead. "Tell your brothers not to come over. Stealth is useless against me," Gu Fei said. Depth was very surprised. He knew that his thief brothers were using stealth to get close to Gu Fei, but even he didn't know when they would make their move. He didn't think that Gu Fei would know better than him, and with a wave of his hand he killed two more. Gu Fei could still sense that there were thieves in stealth watching him, but they had clearly stopped approaching. As a result, Gu Fei went behind Water Depth, lowered his body, and wrapped the rope around Water Depth's leg. Fuck! Water Depth already knew what Gu Fei was going to do. Even though he couldn't move his lower body, he could still move his upper body. He bent down to try and stop Gu Fei, but unfortunately, Gu Fei had already finished tying the knot, and in a flash, he had already left his side. The other end of the rope was tied to Gu Fei's fire baptism, and as he swung it he yelled, "Catch! It's coming!" Zhan Wushang responded and left the team. He caught the flame baptism that was thrown at him. "Drag it back," Gu Fei ordered. "Got it." Unscathed in battle waved his arm. "Fuck your ancestors." Water Depth roared, but the rope around his ankle had already been pulled taut. A huge force came from his leg, and Water Depth fell to the ground. Chapter 325. Zhan Wushang's strength was immense. The things he threw out were always many times faster than he could move himself. Right now, it was naturally not a problem for him to drag someone along. Shui had just been dragged to the ground when he was immediately dragged back. This time, the expert Water Depth couldn't care less about his pride and shouted, "Save me!" There were many mages, thieves, and archers hiding behind the trees. How could they not save Water Depth when he was screaming so miserably? The thieves rushed over to pull him back. The archers shot arrows to break the rope. The mages tried to burn the rope, and some mages tried to use Ice Whirlwind to slow down Water Depth's movement. However, they didn't consider that Water Depth was moving passively. To slow him down, they would have to use Ice Whirlwind on the caster, unscathed in battle. In short, there were all sorts of methods, but none of them were effective. First of all, shooting the rope. How could a normal person achieve this level of archery? To achieve this, one would need to be an expert archer in real life, and with the help of the in-game system, only then would one be able to achieve this level of skill. The mage's fireball was like the heavenly fire wheel. It was impossible to cause a fire in the forest. When the fireball hit the target, it was instantly extinguished. There seemed to be burnt marks left on the rope. Perhaps the durability had decreased, but water depth was only being dragged for a mere 30 meters, so it wasn't a big problem. The thieves were even more pitiful. Gu Fei was currently running behind water depth, and the 3 thieves that rushed over could only disappear in a flash of fire. Water depth on the ground was screaming nonstop. The ground was full of traps, and as he slid and rolled, who knew how many he triggered? Behind him, Gu Fei could only watch as the number of traps on his body increased. It was a sight to behold. Even more mages, thieves, and archers appeared from behind the trees, wanting to help. Meanwhile, the players of Cloud City, who had only been enjoying Gu Fei's stunning performance, finally reacted. Unsworn Sword gave a loud shout, and Reflected Time arrived with the most well-trained archer corps of the 4 seas, instantly raining down arrows. Shui was sliding on the ground with his face facing upwards. Seeing the arrows flying past him in an orderly manner, he was also very surprised. This was a specialty product of the 4 seas, and it wasn't something that could be found everywhere. The rescuers who had rashly revealed themselves were hit by this wave of violent attacks. More than 10 people were killed on the spot, and the rest basically returned with arrows. What was even worse was that he had exposed his position this time. No matter which tree he hid behind, he would be under the watchful eyes of these sharpshooters. Arrows were cheap and plentiful, so archers wouldn't feel the pinch when using them. Now that they couldn't see anyone, they didn't want to stop. After holding back for so long, they finally had an outlet to vent their anger. They didn't stop shooting at all, and the trees that they were hiding in looked like they were being shot by a machine gun. Those who were in a better position and were more familiar with the forest could still find the blind spots between the trees to escape, but most of them could only lean against the trees, not daring to show even a finger. At this time, Water Depth was sliding all the way until he was finally dragged back into the formation by Unscathed in Battle. Under the cover of Unscathed in Battle's arrow formation, Gu Fei wasn't harassed anymore, and he returned smoothly, receiving complicated looks from all sides. Brother Zue is too awesome, my idol. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was the first to compliment him. Gu Fei smiled, he was already used to this kind of thing. Then, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka lowered his head and smiled at Water Depth, who was still on the ground. You're my idol too, as expected of the number 1 trap technician. You're fully equipped now. Ha! Water Depth was both pained and angry. At this time, his whole body was covered in trap clips. Even on his head, other than the original one on his nose, there were 3 more. 2 on his hair, 1 on his ear, and the rest on his arms, legs, chest, and back were all densely covered. This made Unsworn Sword angry. You son of a bitch, you set so many traps in a mere 30 meters, you're a scammer. The other players were also engaged in a heated discussion. Does the trap effect stack? Unscathed in Battle asked. I don't think so. Brother, you replied. It'd be amazing if it did. So many traps, when the fuck will we be able to use them? Unscathed in Battle said. TSK, to have a chance to be caught by so many traps at the same time, and all over the body, what an honor. Yutian Shenming sighed. On the other hand, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was happy for a while, but suddenly became angry. Damn, why can only the system record, but we don't even have the ability to take pictures? The mention of cameras reminded Water Depth. He turned to look at Gu Fei, and after sizing him up, he said, You're the video mage from Cloud City? Now you know fear. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was proud, as if he was the one who pulled Water Depth back. Water Depth didn't pay attention to him, but after hearing the confirmation, he sighed. You really are amazing. Thank you. Gu Fei always maintained the humility of a qualified martial artist. To outsiders, this was extremely pretentious. What made people even more jealous was that this was something that could only be done with real skills. At this moment, there was a clack sound. The first trap on Water Depth's nose had reached its time, and automatically slid off, leaving a cute red nose on Water Depth's face. The other traps were all caught in a flash, but the one on Water Depth's nose was like a starter. Not long after it fell, Water Depth's entire body started to fall off. TSK TSK TSK. The discussion started again. This is also a different kind of peerless beauty. Yutian Shenming continued to admire Water Depth from before. Those who are good at water drown, those who are good at riding fall. Wise words, wise words. Brother, you seem to have learned something from this. When the last trap fell off his body, Water Depth let out a long breath and slowly climbed up from the ground. One of his ankles was still tied by a rope, but he didn't seem to care at all. He stood up straight and patted the dust off his body. Instead, he looked at the busy archers of the 4 seas and nodded in praise. Not bad at archery. Damn it, still pretending to be handsome. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka rolled up his sleeves and was about to come up and beat someone up when he suddenly heard a clack sound. He looked down in disbelief. A trap was stuck on his ankle and he couldn't move at all. Ha! Water Depth laughed loudly. Who's the number 1 trapper? Now you're convinced. Everyone looked at the trap on Tsubasa Sakuratsuka's foot in shock. At this time, he had already walked in front of Water Depth. The trap couldn't restrict the movement of his upper body, so if he wanted to, he could still throw a punch. However, he really couldn't throw a punch because what had just happened made him feel horrified. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was very proud of his trapping skills, but he didn't notice when Water Depth had set another trap on the ground. Although no one would have thought that Water Depth would still be in the mood to throw traps at a time like this, at such a close distance, no one would have noticed it even if they didn't pay attention. What kind of trick did this guy use? Although Unsworn Sword was also surprised by this, he didn't really care. What he cared about was his quest. At this time, he looked at Water Depth with bright eyes. Water Depth, is it? Let's have a good talk. Water Depth chuckled. There's nothing to talk about. This is an online game, and capturing the ringleader first isn't a good idea. Although I'm in your hands now, I can still command my brothers to continue to use tactics against you. Moreover, if I die, I'll only lose 1 level at most. That's nothing. I don't have any value as a hostage at all. Water Depth spoke frankly with assurance, then turned his head towards Gu Fei, who was standing quietly on the side. I really don't understand. What's the point of you spending so much effort to capture me? Gu Fei shook his head and said, let's talk business first. When you're free, come find me for revenge. Also, I want to point out one thing. Capturing you was very easy, no effort at all. Water Depth continued to be indifferent, his expression like a dead pig not afraid of boiling water as he turned back to Unsworn Sword. Don't worry, you guys definitely won't be able to escape. In this kind of situation we have the right time, the right place, and the right people, so the smartest thing to do is to hand him over. That way, we can avoid fighting. You're good, I'm good, everyone's good. Don't even think about it. Unsworn Sword directly interrupted. As everyone can see, I've given you a chance, but your boss isn't willing, so there's nothing I can do. Shui Shen spread his hands and said to the people around him. After that, he looked at Gu Fei and said, go and persuade him, persuade him. As an outsider, he obviously didn't know the relationship between Gu Fei and Unsworn Sword. He only thought that a person with such skills must have a high status in the guild. At this time, someone in the crowd said coldly, although this is a game, it's not that easy to die. That's right, hang this guy up and beat him up. Water Depth's attitude had already angered the crowd, and at this time, someone bent down to pick up the rope that was tied to his leg. However, this guy still didn't care. He laughed and said, brother, are you stupid? Who doesn't get scratched a few hundred times by monsters every day? If you can't even endure this little bit of pain, why would you play a game that needs to be played? This was definitely true. This simulation game didn't have a realistic pain system. Otherwise, who would be able to endure the pain of being stabbed every day in a combat-based game? Coupled with the bad things that happened in the early stages of the game had gone through a major revision. No matter how much you hit, there was a limit to the amount of pain you could feel, and for someone with a bit of willpower, it wasn't hard to endure. Torture seemed to be useless, but the wretched Tsubasa Sakuratsuka had an idea. He jumped out and shouted, hit his dick 100 times, Some righteous people were already embarrassed. Don't forget that there were many girls around. Why were Tsubasa Sakuratsuka and his team in this direction? Wasn't it because the reborn amethyst girls were also here? Watch your manners. Gu Fei patted Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka. Butterfly knot, cough. There's a topic that has to be emphasized. Many readers in the book reviews and replies mentioned that Gu Fei came to the game to practice martial arts. Comrades, this is a misunderstanding. Please reread the first chapter of the book 100 times. I didn't point out in any place that Gu Fei entered the game to practice martial arts. I thought the first few chapters had made it very clear that the main purpose of Gu Fei's game was to use martial arts. At most, it was to practice martial arts in the process. This is the main plot of the book, so let me be clear again. Gu Fei's purpose in the game is to use martial arts. Chapter 326. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka's suggestion was indeed wretched, and many of the surrounding players felt embarrassed for him. But wretched methods always worked. Didn't Depth's expression change after hearing this, and he couldn't help but shiver? Even so, he quickly adjusted himself and comforted himself. Don't worry, it's impossible. The system has restrictions. The system did indeed have this restriction, and it had been adjusted when it was first reforged after the violent incident. So, in the parallel world, it was fine to strip naked and expose one's private parts, but there was a technical barrier if one wanted to commit rape. But don't think that you could be a free pervert and expose your private parts just like that. The system would monitor such perverted actions closely. This was much easier than the police catching thieves in real life. As long as the system found out, the player's account would be destroyed immediately, and the player's identity would be blacklisted. The game company also reserved the right to sue the player. Once you received a complaint from other players, your trouble would move from virtual to real. So, since the game was released, other than the first day when it was still immature, nothing like this had happened. At this time, Depth kept using these rules to cheer himself up, maintaining a state of nonchalance. Looking at the players surrounding him, it was clear that they were at their wits' end, and Depth revealed a satisfied smile. Unsworn Sword couldn't take it anymore. He swung his fist at Depth's face, and the players behind him quickly moved aside to make a path. Depth was sent flying. The sword of no oath that was tied to his leg had already been taken from Zhan Wusheng. Now, he was personally holding it in his hand. After sending it flying into the water, he quickly pulled it back. Depth wiped the corner of his mouth and sneered. It doesn't hurt at all. He stood up and glared at Unsworn Sword. But I'll remember this punch. You're still threatening me. Unsworn Sword was furious, and he wanted to punch again. But suddenly, two hands landed on his shoulders, and they said the same thing. Forget it. Unsworn Sword stopped and looked left and right. On his left was Gu Fei, and on his right was Drifting. The two of them were also looking at each other. Obviously, they were surprised that the other had come out to stop them. Gu Fei had been there the whole time, but Drifting had just come out of the crowd. Deepwater squinted at him and smiled. You're the one, Drifting. What's going on? Wandering to Cloud City? Drifting nodded. I didn't know when you came to this city. It's been a while, said Deepwater. Everyone looked at this and that. Unsworn Sword wanted to ask Drifting why he didn't say anything when he knew someone in Forest Shade City, but their conversation quickly answered the question. Drifting didn't know the depth of the water in Forest Shade City. Although Drifting was one of the 5 strongest sorcerers, he was the most ordinary kind. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for him to stand on the periphery like Gu Fei. Gu Fei managed to capture one of them alive in no time at all. Only the players in this area had witnessed it with their own eyes. The others had only heard about it from word of mouth. While discussing it, they continued to pay close attention to the direction they were monitoring. When Drifting heard Water Depth's name, he left his region and came over. Are you friends? Unsworn Sword frowned and looked at Drifting. There were pros and cons to everything. They were friends. On the bright side, perhaps Water Depth would let them go as a favor. On the negative side, of course, because of Drifting, it wasn't convenient for him to make things difficult for Water Depth. However, today wasn't a lucky day. Drifting replied indifferently, sort of. From his tone, it was obvious that they weren't friends. On the other side, Waterdepth saw through Unsworn Sword's thoughts and sneered. It doesn't matter how close a friend is. I have a bunch of brothers following me. I can't just answer to myself. Unsworn Sword wanted to wave his fist again, but Gu Fei stopped him. Forget it. There's no point in hitting him. It won't solve anything other than venting your anger. This brother has some brains. Waterdepth had a good impression of Gu Fei. Let's think of a way to break out first. This guy is useless. Just kill him, Gu Fei continued. Damn, you're so cruel. His impression of drifting went downhill. Unsworn Sword thought for a moment and glanced at Waterdepth. This guy looks like he's quite loyal. Since he's so worried for his brother, shouldn't his brother owe him a favor? Pull him to the front and threaten him. Childish, really childish. It was within his expectations that he would run away. Our guild has an agreement. We can't give up on the interests of the entire team for anyone, including myself. If you don't believe me, you can try. Waterdepth was calm. Go. Unsworn Sword waved his hand. However, Gu Fei was beside him. He ignored him and turned to leave. Obviously, he didn't want to do this. Waterdepth saw this and laughed. This brother has character. I admire you. Unsworn Sword ordered Gu Fei around. If he didn't obey, he would lose face. However, he couldn't do anything. He could only call a few of his brothers to do it. Before leaving, he tied Waterdepth up a few more times. Unsworn Sword gripped the end of the rope tightly and allowed him to be taken away. At this time, Reflection of Years was still commanding the arrow formation to shoot. After Waterdepth was brought to the front and back, the firepower was temporarily extinguished. Reigning the Four Seas began to shout according to their boss's orders. People in the forest, listen up. Your boss is in our hands. Immediately put down your weapons, disarm the traps, and leave the forest. Otherwise, go to the revival point and pick up your boss. After shouting once, there was no response. One more time. 10 seconds. Unsworn Sword said. Count my ass. If you want to kill him, then hurry up. Stop wasting time. I can tell that your guild has no future. Waterdepth was impatient. Unsworn Sword ignored him and personally came to the front. People in the forest, listen up. I'm going to count to 3. If you don't do as we said, I'll cut down your boss first. Now let's play again. I'm going to start counting. From the looks of it, Unsworn Sword was getting impatient. Just a moment ago he had said tens of seconds, but now he had changed it to 3 seconds. 1. Unsworn Sword roared. No response. 2. He shouted again. Still no response. Unsworn Sword had already slowly raised his greatsword. 3. With a shout, the sword of no oath swung down. He wasn't trying to scare them. He didn't have much hope in this method. He was just trying it out in a desperate situation. Since it didn't work, he would just kill Depth. Either way, whether Depth died or not, killing him would be a good way to vent his anger and boost their morale. Wait! Just as the sword was about to hit, a voice came from the forest. Unsworn Sword's eyes lit up. However, he didn't stop his sword. This was just a normal attack. The sword of Unsworn was not strong enough to insta-kill an opponent with a normal attack. Initially, Zhang Xian had wanted to slash a few more times, but now that the other party had finally spoken, he decided to stop. Who said wait? Depth was the first to get angry. A person came out from behind a tree. He looked like a mage. He glanced at Depth, who was being held up by Unsworn Sword by the back of his collar. His expression was one of pain. Finally, he turned to Unsworn Sword. Let's disarm the trap and let him go. Are you fucking drunk? What's our deal? Depth roared. Why do you care about me? That person didn't even look at him. He only looked at Unsworn Sword. Unsworn Sword smiled victoriously. How loyal. What a group of good brothers. After the quest is over, we might be able to become friends. Please. Unsworn Sword gestured. The mage waved his hand. A few archers came out from behind the tree and started disarming the trap. Their movements showed that they were very skilled. Unsworn Sword looked around. His gaze was extremely cold. He coldly said, "The trap I'm talking about is all of them." The mage didn't say anything, but it was obvious that he had sent a message in the channel. Not long after, countless archers came out from behind the trees and started disarming the trap. The sheer number of archers shocked the players in Cloud City. Not counting those whose line of sight was blocked, there should be at least 200 of them, right? Reigning the Four Seas had already done their best to develop their guild. Currently, they were only level 5 with 750 members. They believed that the other side was only at this level. Under such circumstances, there were actually more than 200 archers, and all of them were lurkers. Wasn't this class balance a bit too ridiculous? And looking at how busy they were, it seemed that each of them had set more than one trap. Could it be that each lurker could only set one trap? While everyone was in awe, these lurkers had already finished what they were doing. They disarmed the trap and stood to the side, quietly watching the players in Cloud City. The mage looked at Unsworn Sword and said, "All right, let them go." "Idiots. You bunch of idiots." Depth seemed to be angry and touched by his brother's help. He buried his head and kept muttering. "Yuzai, go take a look." Unsworn Sword gestured. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka nodded and walked forward. After a careful inspection, he turned around and nodded. "No traps." Unsworn Sword was very satisfied. This feeling of victory was too good. He couldn't help but want to show off his style again. He smiled at the other side and said, "I still need to find out which direction Forest Shade City should go." "That way." The mage pointed in a direction. This direction happened to be the direction Tsubasa Sakuratsuka had just checked. Unsworn Sword nodded in relief. "Thank you." In a good mood, Unsworn Sword's style was even more impressive. After a polite reply, he said, "When we leave, we will naturally release Brother Depth." After saying that, he adjusted the team and was ready to move in that direction. Unexpectedly, someone suddenly walked out from the group and lazily waved his hand, saying, "Wait." Chapter 327. A priest who always reeked of alcohol, who looked like a woman but was actually a man. Who else could it be other than the Han family young master? At this time, the team had only just started moving forward when the Han family young master stepped out to block the front of the line, immediately stopping them. This guy leisurely walked to where Sword of Vow and the others were and said with a smile, "Childish, very childish." "What do you mean by that?" Unsworn Sword was in a good mood, and the Han family young master suddenly came out to criticize him, which made him extremely unhappy. "I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about him." The Han family young master pointed at Shueishin. Shueishin was walking beside Sword Without Oath. The rope that tied him up was still tightly held in Sword Without Oath's hand. Sword Without Oath looked at him, only to see that Shueishin's nonchalant expression had finally disappeared, and he was staring straight at the Han family young master, his face full of shock. "Acting?" The young master of the Han clan dragged out his words and pointed at the water. "But this little trick of yours might be able to fool others, but it's still too inexperienced for me. What's going on?" Sword Without Oath was a little confused. "It's all an act." The Han family young master looked at Sword Without Oath, his eyes full of drunkenness. It really made people wonder if this guy was talking nonsense after drinking too much. But Sword Without Oath had to ask again, "What do you mean?" "He said something that you should believe." The Han family young master said. "What is it?" "Their guild will never sacrifice the interests of the whole for a single person, not even for him, the guild leader." The Han family young master said. "This." Unsworn Sword looked around, only to see the shadows of the ambushers hiding behind the trees again. "If we continue forward, there will definitely be a big ambush, maybe a big ambush that will wipe us out." The Han family young master smiled. "You mean to say that they are only pretending to let us go because of the depth of the water, so that we will let down our guard, and then set up a bigger ambush to eliminate us in one fell swoop?" Unsworn Sword was surprised. "That's right. From the moment he was captured, they no longer cared about Shueishin's life or death. Everything was just an act," Han family young master said as he looked at Shueishin. How could this be? Unsworn Sword was still in disbelief. But the strongest actor is still brother Shui Shui. The scoundrels he came over to play successfully provoked and enticed you. Don't you think you'd be letting yourself down if you don't make good use of this hateful guy? The Han family young master continued to smile. Sort of no oath. At the same time, he emphasized many times that he had no value as a hostage. After hearing such words so many times, you can't help but wonder if this guy really can't be used as a hostage. Then you found out that they are a very loyal group, so you thought that even though the falling flowers have no intentions, the flowing water might have feelings. Since you didn't lose anything, you might as well give it a try. After giving it a try, of course you felt good in your heart. But unfortunately, you completely fell into his trap. The Han family young master said. Sword of No Oath still didn't say anything, but his expression was getting uglier and uglier. On the other hand, Gu Fei, who had been standing at the side, heard that the Han family young master had clearly seen through the opponent's intentions, but still had to say it sarcastically and mockingly. This Sword of No Oath couldn't do anything to him and would most likely tear Shui Shin to pieces. He hurriedly said, "You really talk a lot. Why didn't you say so earlier?" "Didn't I say it already?" The Han family young master shrugged. Gu Fei suspected that this guy had purposely waited for this moment. Sword of No Oath was so pleased with himself that he almost couldn't control himself, and fiercely kicked people down from the clouds to hell. This guy had this kind of bad taste. Gu Fei thought. "I didn't think you would be here too." Shui Shin suddenly said, "Where's the sword demon?" When these words came out, everyone was shocked. They didn't think that Shui Shin, the Han family young master, and the sword demon knew each other. And from their tone, their relationship was probably much closer than Drifting's. When Sword of No Oath heard that they were friends again, he immediately felt depressed. Why was it so hard to vent his anger today? The sword demon also came out from the crowd and stood beside the Han family young master. He nodded towards Shui Shin and said, "Here. Why are you two in someone else's guild?" Shui Shin was very confused. "We're a mercenary group now, hired by someone," Sword Demon said. "Oh." Shui Shin let out a long sigh. "I was wondering why there were so many people. I thought the guild was huge. So many of them are mercenaries, right? Fuck, if you're from the guild, then put on your guild badge. Can't you have some guild spirit? Can you?" Sword of No Oath couldn't take it anymore. He cursed and rushed over. He first looked at the Han family young master and the sword demon and said coldly, "Han brothers, sword demon brother, this guy is now our guild's enemy. If I kill him, you won't have any objections, right?" In the end, the two of them nodded and said, "Of course." The surrounding people were all confused. Was this a friend or an enemy? Shui Shin didn't care at all. He stood up, and his expression returned to being nonchalant. He looked at the Han family young master and the sword demon and said, "You two can't run away. The Priest Academy and the Thief Guild will pick you two up and we'll drink together tonight." He then pointed at the Han family young master. "Sword demons on me. You'll pay for your own. I advise you not to block the way. Otherwise, you'll probably drop 2 levels tonight." Han family young master said indifferently. "Hey, let's wait and see." Shui Shin said to the two of them, and then looked at Sword of No Oath with an extremely disdainful expression. "Why aren't you doing anything? Can you change your garrulous, naggy, sloppy, and unromantic style?" "Unromantic?" The crowd was confused. "Hee, I just said it casually." Shui Shin's smile was still bright even when he was about to die. "Go die." Sword of No Oath only felt that if he didn't die, this guy would definitely die from anger. He swung the great sword in his hand down. Unexpectedly, a flame suddenly appeared beside Shui Shin. Shui Shin also turned his head in surprise. It was Gu Fei who had dealt with him. A white light flashed, and Shui Shin disappeared. Sword of No Oath / missed. He looked at Gu Fei angrily. "What are you doing?" "I'm cleaner." Gu Fei nodded and said calmly. Sword of No Oath's teeth were about to break, but he couldn't say a single word. The people from the child elite group didn't care about him. Gu Fei scratched his head and asked the two of them, "Are you two old friends?" "Of course. We're veterans of the game. How could we not have a few friends? Do you think they're all like you?" Han family young master said disdainfully. Everyone was sweating like a waterfall. Currently, the most famous and widely known mage in the game, with videos as proof, was being called a noob. This was too shocking. Luckily, Gu Fei was an honest person. If you called him a noob, he would probably beat you up so badly that your mother wouldn't recognize you. As for calling him a noob in the game, he would admit it in his heart. However, since it was said by the Han family young master, he had to refute it no matter what. He calmly said, "Watch your words. You should know that I have the urge to cut you up." Han family young master's expression changed slightly. He took out a bottle of alcohol from his pocket and walked away. Everyone stood there, reminiscing for a long time. After a while, they came back to reality. Immediately, a problem that had been bothering them for a long time rose up in their heads. What do we do? What do we do? Everyone looked toward Sword of No Oath. Sword of No Oath was feeling extremely depressed. Originally, killing Shueishan could have helped him out, but in the end, it was taken by Gu Fei, who didn't know what was good for him. At this moment, he had nowhere to vent his anger. He wanted to kick everyone he saw. In the end, so many people didn't know what to do. They all looked at him with pitiful expressions. He immediately became angry. "Fuck, let's go, let's fight them." Calm down, calm down." Reflected Years hurriedly said. Feng Xing also comforted him. "These bastards, I'll teach them a lesson sooner or later." Sword of No Oath clenched his teeth. As for how many people this bunch of bastards actually included, it was up to everyone to figure it out for themselves, so there was no need to ask. "Let's think of a way." Reflected Years said. "What do you have in mind?" Sword of No Oath asked him. I'm still thinking. I originally knew their situation, but they must have rearranged their formation just now. I don't know what their current formation is." Reflected Years said. "Doesn't that Tsubasa Sakuratsuka know how to find traps? Doesn't Qianli know how to use anti-stealth when he's drunk? Tell the two of them to go together and find all the traps." Sword of No Oath said. "They took out the traps just now. This time, it might not be a trap, right?" Reflected Years said. "If it's not a trap, then what are we afraid of? Charge." Sword of No Oath said. Calm down, calm down." Reflected Years saw that Sword of No Oath wasn't in the mood to discuss serious matters, so he dragged him to the side and sat down. "You rest for a bit. I'll go discuss with someone else." After saying this, he slipped away. Sword of No Oath's state was too dangerous. It was better not to get close. Reflected Years looked for someone to discuss with. He called a few people in his guild who could come up with ideas and gathered the leaders of the major guilds to discuss. Now that everyone knew what had happened, apart from feeling lucky that they had almost fallen into a trap, they were also afraid of the other side's methods. At this moment, everyone was in low spirits. "Uzi, did they set up another trap?" Reflected Years asked. Just now, under the cover of the crisscrossing Four Seas arrow formation, these guys from the Great Hunt had investigated their surroundings again. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka's face was like a bitter gourd. "They did it again. The situation seems to be the same as before. I really don't get it. How did they manage to do it without us knowing?" Chapter 328. The Han family young master smiled and said, "That should be easy to understand. If they can trap us once without us knowing, why can't they trap us a second time?" Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was startled, but when he thought about it, it really did make sense. The Han family young master looked around and said, "This kind of terrain is too suitable for lurkers. There are only 1,000 of us, and no one is hiding. Aren't there a lot of things we can't see from here because our line of sight is blocked?" Everyone nodded. Reflection Time looked at the Han family young master. "Do you have any ideas, Han brothers?" "The hardest thing to deal with right now is, of course, these traps. As long as we can find a way to get rid of them, we won't be afraid of a chaotic battle," said the Han family young master. Of course, although no one said it, It was clearly written on everyone's faces. The Han family young master took a sip from the bottle and continued, "I've thought of a way to set up traps, but I don't know if anyone is willing to do it." "What?" Reflection Time asked eagerly. The Han family young master smiled. "Human mind clearing." Everyone was startled, but they quickly reacted because just now, Water Depth had put on a good show of human mind clearing. However, this method treated people as tools. It was a problem whether or not players would be willing to sacrifice themselves for justice. For example, Water Depth's body was covered in traps. The pain wasn't scary, but what was scary was the sorry state of having 4 trap clips hanging from his head. Humans were creatures that cared a lot about their reputation, and many people viewed their reputation as more important than their lives. Moreover, in a game where life wasn't worth anything, more players would rather be suicide bombers than be a mind-clearing machine that used themselves as bait. Han family's young master's idea came out, but it was completely silent. After a moment of silence, there was another flash of light among the group of players. It was obvious that the enemy mage had used the cover of the forest to sneak out and bombard them again. This time, the players of Cloud City were prepared. The mages who suddenly appeared were discovered. The archers, mages, and other ranged players quickly opened fire. However, the enemy mages only showed their heads for a moment before retreating, sacrificing only a few people. The players in Cloud City were having a hard time. There were traps everywhere, and they had nowhere to run. The crowd was once again pushing and shoving each other, and there were countless casualties. Seeing that he couldn't delay any longer, Time finally said, "The Han brothers' idea seems feasible. Then, how about your mercenary group carry it out?" Han family young master smiled. "Then you have to discuss with them directly." "Anyway, I won't do it." Everyone turned to look at him. This guy was the one who came up with the idea, but he didn't even want to do it himself. Was he just waiting to see others make a fool of themselves? Which group leader is willing to take on this responsibility? Time asked again. Such a difficult mission. Our small group definitely won't be able to do it. Let's ask the other bosses to send experts. A few small group leaders took the lead to express their opinions. "I think it's a bit difficult." Someone from a large group also expressed his opinion. "It's too difficult, too difficult. We can't accept this mission either." The other groups also expressed their opinions. "This doesn't need to be done by any group. Anyone can do it. Brother Time, why don't you recruit them one by one?" A group leader suggested. Time saw that no one volunteered, so he could only use his trump card, smash it with money. He immediately waved his hand. "Then I'll have to trouble all the group leaders to call out to those who are willing to take on this mission. Each person will be given 300 gold. 300 gold wasn't a small amount. According to the current market price of mercenary groups, very few people would be able to get 100 gold, no matter how difficult the mission was. This was because there would be more mercenary players participating in missions that were more difficult. The high price would be split among many people, so there wouldn't be too much for a single person. A single person price of 300 gold. This was a record. It could be seen that Time knew that even though this mission wasn't difficult, it was a tough one. After the various team leaders clicked their tongues in wonder, they followed Reflection of Time's instructions. Reflection of Time wasn't idle either. He also made an announcement in his guild. If someone was willing to do it, that would be even better. As the saying goes, don't let the goodies flow into your own fields. With a large reward, there would definitely be brave people. The words of the ancients couldn't be too wrong. After this news spread, people quickly responded to the summons. There were people from mercenary groups and guilds from reigning the 4 seas. Time looked at the few people from his own guild and was quite disappointed. These were the professional players that he knew from his guild. They were all professional players. Normally, they worked very hard in the game to earn gold. The coins or equipment they earned were all exchanged for RMB to put into their daily lives. No matter how much money these players had, they wouldn't spend it carelessly. The most important thing was that the equipment they wore was the best value for money. They would only work hard to earn money in the game. Earn money, increase their strength? This was something that other players would take for granted, but they would think about it. For example, if they needed 5 points of strength to complete a business that could earn 200 gold, they wouldn't hesitate to spend 100 gold to get a piece of equipment that added 5 points of strength. If the extra 5 points of strength were just to make a certain weapon perform better, or to increase their own attack power, they wouldn't spend this money. When most people thought of professional players, they would think that their levels, equipment, and techniques were all high. In reality, most professional players had high levels because they had invested a lot of time into the game. Their equipment, on the other hand, was common, but there were many different types because they had different needs at different times. In addition, their techniques were highly targeted. For example, they might be very good at running quests. As for things like PvP, they wouldn't spend the effort to hone their skills. Most guilds wouldn't take in too many of these players, but they would at least take in a few. They were also very helpful to the guild. However, Reflection Time didn't like these people. When he saw that these people were the ones who stood up for him, he knew that these 300 gold coins would be deposited into the bank in the blink of an eye. They definitely wouldn't be used to strengthen themselves. Sigh. Even so, since they were going to earn money, it was better to let someone they knew earn it. Reflecting Years had already selected the people from his guild. Then he asked young Master Han, "How many people do you think are suitable for this quest?" 10 or so will be enough. The Han family young master smiled as he looked at the brave men who had come to participate. Reflection Time continued to choose from the other mercenary groups. He didn't care about levels, equipment, or techniques. Reflection Time just wanted to find people who were tall, wide, and took up a lot of space. This way, the effect of Minesweeper would be more obvious. As he sized up the players one by one, Reflection Time suddenly froze. "This beauty is also participating in this quest?" Yes. I've never done this quest before," the girl answered cheerfully. Reflection Time was astonished. He didn't think that even a girl would be willing to roll on the ground and get caught in a trap in order to earn money. Reflection Time couldn't bear to see this. He wiped his sweat and said, "You can't do it." But the girl was actually anxious. We need this number." Reflection Time patted a tall and strong male player next to him. The girl looked at the player in confusion. "What number is this?" "He's quite tall." Reflection Time admired the physique of the person in front of him. With this physique, it would be impossible to clear the Minesweeper without him. "I'm quite strong too," the girl said as she slapped the tall man next to her to the ground. "See, he's not as strong as me." The girl was very happy. It's not about strength. Reflection Time wiped his sweat and subconsciously dodged 2 steps to the side. The girl was indeed quite strong. The guy still couldn't get up after being slapped for a long time. This player was indeed tall, but he was actually a cleric. "Then what is it?" the girl asked. "This actually..." Reflection Time struggled to organize his words. He was in so much pain that he wanted to kill himself against the tree next to him. Fortunately, at this moment, one of the group leaders stood up and pulled the girl back. "Little Rain, you really aren't suitable for this quest." "Sister Lualua, why? How am I not suitable?" June Rain felt quite wronged. "Because this quest needs male players," Lualuo said. "Oh, I see." June Rain nodded. "No wonder. Then I'm leaving." With that, she turned around and really left. Reflection Time was stunned until the tall cleric got up from the ground. He held his shoulder and said, "Damn, you're a full-strength warrior, right?" Lualuo threw a healing spell at him. "Are you okay?" I'm fine. The tall cleric was also very broad-minded and didn't take the slap to heart. Reflection Time seemed to wake up from a dream and shook his head. Everything that had just happened was like a dream. Now that he had returned to reality, he quickly chose from the remaining people. There were a total of 10 players who wanted to join his guild. Without any hesitation, he paid the 300 gold coins. One person was 300, so 10 people were 3,000. The other players all sighed at this huge sum of money, but they weren't envious at all, except for those who had failed. The Han family young master stood up again. After sizing up the 10 people, he said with a smile, "Thank you for your hard work." As they stuffed the money into their pockets, they shouted, "For the mission!" This caused a wave of curses. There are two ways to clear the mines. The first is similar to the depth of the water just now. We first tie you up with a rope, then throw you out and drag you back. The traps along the way will be gone. The second is to make you into a mop and push you as we fight our way out. Choose for yourselves. Hearing this, the 10 people realized that the second plan didn't require too many falls and was closer to their companions, so they all said, "We want to be a mop." Chapter 329. Making a mop didn't require any skills. After choosing the material for the mop, the players were very interested in the process of making it. Some wanted to participate and show off their skills, while others didn't want to show off their skills, but they still wanted to see the process. Apart from human flesh, rods and ropes were also essential. In the forest, there was no shortage of rods, and they were the kind that were very suitable for binding. As for the ropes, they were sponsored by Gu Fei, who tossed over 3 bundles. The players were puzzled. Why did this guy bring so much rope? The rope he used to swing from the tree was still hanging from the tree. He used one to tie up water depth, and now he took out 3 bundles. This top player really had a personality. Outsiders could only speculate, but those who were close to Gu Fei, such as Yutian Shenming, had already asked. There are still benefits to playing a game. Gu Fei sighed. It's so convenient to carry things in your pocket. It's not convenient to carry so many weapons in real life. Weapons? Are those weapons? Yutian Shenming murmured. Of course. So, you have other weapons in your pocket? Yutian Shenming looked at Gu Fei's pocket. A little, but most of them aren't easy to use, Gu Fei said as he showed Yutian Shenming some. Among them, Yutian Shenming had seen the baptism of fire before. There was another similar one, which Gu Fei explained was convenient for wielding. There were also several small daggers, which were said to be used as throwing knives. There was also a large dagger, which was the whiteboard dagger from the werewolf's body. There was also a long wooden stick. Gu Fei stood in front of Yutian Shenming and explained, "Look, this is called an eyebrow stick. It's at the height of the user's eyebrows." When Gu Fei took out another one, Yutian Shenming was the first to exclaim, "Fork! Damn, 2 knives, a fork and a stick. So you're a teenage mutant ninja turtle." Gu Fei was very depressed, but he patiently explained, "This is called an iron ruler." Later, it was introduced to Japan, where it was called Ronin's fork. People who practice karate often use it. Does Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles practice karate? Yutian Shenming mumbled to himself. Gu Fei fell into deep thought. I think so. Let me have a look." Yutian Shenming extended his hand. Even if this was Gu Fei's so-called iron ruler, Yutian Shenming was sure that there was no such equipment in the game. Gu Fei's wooden stick looked like it had been made by him, but this fork was obviously made of iron. How could someone without craftsmanship make it? In the end, when he took a look, Imperial Sky Shenming's face was covered in tears. The so-called iron ruler showed Uncle Murray's lost fork, a typical quest item. It's an NPC's item. Can you return it to him? You don't want to do the quest anymore? Yutian Shenming said. Quest? My goal in this quest is to get this. Gu Fei said, then regretfully added, "Unfortunately, I only got one. I need another to make a pair. Later, find a kind-hearted person to do this quest and get one for you," Yutian Shenming said as he continued to stretch his head out. "What else do you have?" Gu Fei was about to continue showing off when Enscathed in Battle came over. "Hey, what are you still doing? The mop is about to start." Oh. Yutian Shenming quickly ran away. Clearly, he was more interested in the mop. Gu Fei shook his head regretfully. There was a reason why Kung Fu was declining. Look at Yutian Shenming, he was more interested in these boring things than learning about Kung Fu. "Aren't you going? I've got a good spot in the front row." Unscathed in Battle invited Gu Fei. Go. Gu Fei reluctantly put away his treasures and went to watch the mop with Unscathed in Battle. There were thousands of people, but there were only 10 performers. Everyone wanted to see it. Some players pouted unhappily because they wanted to see it too. However, they were scolded by reflected years, who told them to continue monitoring the movements of the lurkers around them. The rest of the people squeezed in one place, proving that unscathed in battles, good spot in the front row was necessary. The 10 contestants were now lying on the ground. The chosen mop maker held a rope in his left hand and a stick in his right. His face was filled with a never-before-seen smile. A group of gambling-loving friends had already placed their bets. They were betting on which mop would be made first. During this process, the bettors and makers were strictly forbidden to talk to each other to prevent cheating. Gambling had always been a very serious matter. Following Reflected Year's command, the crowd let out a roar. This was the most exciting moment since the Cloud City players entered the forest that night. In an instant, the sound of cheers and laughter rang out incessantly. The brothers from Waterdeep, who were still lying in ambush in the forest, were puzzled. They didn't know why these guys were suddenly so happy. Another wave of sneak attacks? Their original plan was not to launch consecutive sneak attacks in a short period of time. This might be more lethal, but it would be a continuous exposure, and it would be easy for the opponent to find an opening. These guys were good at this. They knew that delaying the front line and wearing down the enemy bit by bit was the way to go. However, at this moment, the opponent's mood suddenly became excited, and the air seemed to be filled with the smell of conspiracy. This made them very uneasy. In the end, there was a disagreement among them. Some people thought that the more it was at this time, the more they should see the situation clearly before formulating a strategy. Acting rashly would only lead to more serious consequences. On the other hand, some people thought that the opponents guarding the perimeter were a little uneasy, and it was the best time to launch a wave of sneak attacks. Just when the two sides couldn't reach a consensus and couldn't come to a conclusion for a while, the Cloud City players burst into cheers. 10 people-oriented mops had been born. Break through to the northwest. Arrow formation, get ready to cover. Lurkers, thieves, cover the rear. While everyone was cheering and watching the mops being made, Reflected Years had already arranged the matters for the breakout. First was naturally the person who controlled the mops. This, of course, had to be a violent warrior that focused on strength. As the leader of the group, Unsworn Sword won an uncontested spot and became the captain of the mops team. And Unscathed in Battle was the most famous warrior in the online gaming world. Currently, he also focused on strength. He also won an opportunity and was secretly very happy. How many opportunities like this were there in life? Other than that, Luoluo also helped June's Rain get a spot. Although June Rain's equipment wasn't top-notch, it was extremely rare for a warrior to add points to a full strength item. In addition, she also borrowed Slender Waist Dance's fire resistance equipment. There was no doubt that June Rain had an advantage. Fresh quests always made June Rain full of energy. She waved the mops in her hands vigorously. The person on the mops received the silent prayers of the players who were familiar with June Rain, but didn't make a sound. When June Rain calmed down, everyone went over to take a look. The person had long since fainted. What a coincidence! This person was the cleric that June Rain had knocked out in the previous selection. He deeply understood the girl's valiance. When he was assigned to June Rain, he had already fainted from nervousness. For him, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. The team quickly organized themselves. At times like this, Unsworn Sword usually had to say a few words. But at this time, he was probably eager to play with the human mops in his hands. He simply waved his hand and said, "Finally, it's our turn to ambush. Brothers, let's go." The tightly knit crowd suddenly opened up a gap. The Paladin players quickly worked, buffing the mops team members with the required buffs. Following that, the 10 Tuba warriors were pushed forward by the other 10 warriors. Following closely behind them was the cleric team. As soon as they rushed out, they started casting healing spells. It was very important to ensure that not a single one of the mops was missing. After that, it was time for the archer team led by Time Reflection. The archers were all sharp-eyed. No movement in the forest in front of them could escape their eyes. Apart from that, the mages were responsible for guarding the left and right sides. After that, it was time for some scattered professions. They weren't assigned a clear task in the breakout, but if a battle broke out, they would be the main force. Finally, it was time for some rogues and a few lurkers to form a team. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka commanded his brothers to set up a few traps here and there, hoping to get an eye for an eye. Most of them were stealthed rogues. If the opponent rushed out to attack, they would undoubtedly be pleasantly surprised. Gu Fei and Sword Demon were also assigned to this team. There was no doubt that Sword Demon was a rogue. Gu Fei, on the other hand, had the lethality to block 100. Time Reflection thought that it would be very intimidating to have him cover the rear. The effect of the human mops was very significant. The sound of the trap clips constantly popping played a beautiful tune. The players of Forest Shade City were obviously unprepared for such an excessive method used by the players of Cloud City. They had no established plan to crack it. The traps were triggered by the mops team, and the players behind could do whatever they wanted without scruples. The mages were not stingy with their area of effect spells to the sides, regardless of whether there were people or not. Because everyone knew that there was no one, it was just because you couldn't see it. Maybe there were rogues lurking, or maybe there were mages or lurkers or others hiding behind a tree. The players of Forest Shade City were obviously flustered by this large-scale attack from Cloud City, and the flaws in their arrangement were also exposed at this time. They were at a disadvantage in numbers, and they were even more scattered due to the execution of the encirclement. When the restraining power of the traps was lost, in the face of the concentrated and explosive charge of the players of Cloud City, they couldn't stop it at all. Chapter 330. The Cloud City players' rush was very sudden, and their human drag tactic was far beyond the expectations of the Shady City players. In addition to the scattered players, the Shady City players also had a major flaw: Deepwater wasn't there. It hadn't been long since Deepwater had returned to the city, so he hadn't had time to rush back. Although the players could continue to command without being present, when faced with some unexpected situations, remote command obviously couldn't keep up with the rhythm. Just the two sides would waste a lot of time asking each other about the situation. In this time, the 30-meter trap zone in Shady City had been swept clean by the mopping team at the front. In fact, there weren't as many traps as the Cloud City players thought, and it couldn't be compared to the 30-meter trap that Deepwater had slid through before. It seemed that the other side's trap encirclement was also loose and dense. Deepwater openly showed his face in front of everyone, so he chose a more densely packed area, and the result was a bitter pill to swallow. And the Shady City players couldn't be said to not be working hard. They had done their best to intercept, but unfortunately, the results were very little. In the face of an army of 1,000 people, small sneak attacks were of no help, and the crisscrossing seas arrow formation was really terrifying. A little careless player would be shot down in an instant, and even some stealth thieves would be shot out in the process. In the confrontation between the mages, the Cloud City players also had the upper hand, and perhaps even they themselves didn't know this. Because they weren't aiming at any target, they were just blindly carpet bombing. Only the mages behind the trees knew the pain of this. They hid behind the trees, afraid of the crisscrossing seas arrow formation, not daring to move too much. This was almost no different from falling into a hunting trap. Then they watched the spells fall from the sky and rise from the ground, and could only grit their teeth and bear it. It was possible to survive this spell, but in the face of the storm of arrows, there was only one word to describe death. Even so, one of the 10 people in the Cloud City mopping team was still killed. It was just that this was a character that controlled a mop, and as soon as he died, someone else immediately followed up. However, one of the 10 mops didn't seem to be tied securely, and it slipped in the process of being pushed. But this didn't affect the overall situation, and the troops in front had completely broken through the trap zone. After that, the mages did not let up on their attacks. They continued to throw spells in all directions regardless of whether they hit their targets or not, covering the players behind them to smoothly pass through this passage that they had painstakingly cleared. At the same time, Reflected Years gave an order, and some of the thieves who had long since been prepared spread out after entering stealth. This was arranged in advance by Reflected Years in order to prevent the opponent from secretly laying traps everywhere after breaking out of the encirclement. Now that so many thieves were secretly observing from all sides, If the opponent made any moves, it would be impossible for them to escape the eyes of so many people. The trap was broken, but this forest battle still made the players of Cloud City tremble with fear. Under such circumstances, no one was in a hurry to retaliate against their opponents. After everyone broke out of the encirclement, the team immediately continued forward. Everyone still had a panicked and hurried expression on their faces. The mood of the Shady Forest City players was even worse than them. Their first encirclement and suppression plan had obviously failed. Deepwater could only sigh deeply after learning of this news. Since they had used such a cheap move like human flesh mopping, it was not too much to say that they were still alive. Wasn't it said that the most despicable people were invincible? What do we do next? In the face of the Cloud City players' covetous arrow formation, as well as the mages who would throw spells to the left and right from time to time as they walked, the Shady Forest City players would never dare to go up and fight head-on. Are they going in the right direction? Deepwater asked. Yes. Someone answered. After all, Unsworn Sword and the others had already studied the route before entering the forest. At this time, they were just continuing to move in that general direction. Even if there was a slight deviation as mentioned before, it was just that they couldn't reach the city gate. They could still find the main city. I'm afraid it won't be so easy to encircle them like before. Everyone disperse immediately. In small groups, harass them on a small scale. Figure out their route of advance, delay their advance as much as possible, and buy time to set up another ambush on the path they must pass through, Deepwater said. Understood. The Shady Forest City players moved again. The small groups that Deepwater spoke of were only a unit of 10 people. At this time, they were all assembled and moving forward from different directions. Is there a chance for a sneak attack? Deepwater asked. It's a little difficult. There were still quite a few hesitant voices. Their mages will throw a spell from time to time to test it. It's just a spell test. That won't kill anyone. It'll be fine as long as everyone doesn't make a sound. They're just throwing it blindly. What I'm afraid of is that the formation of the other party's team isn't as concentrated as we saw it. There will definitely be thieves scattered around. If the sneak attack is seen by them, then it'll be troublesome. We must first find these guys and eliminate them. Did you bring everything? Deepwater said. Of course. The thing that Deepwater was talking about was the white lime imported from Baishur City. This thing was formed by the special geographical features of Baishur City. It could be found all over the mountains and plains, and didn't even cost a copper coin. It was used by clever players to deal with the stealth of thieves. This was probably a problem that even the designers hadn't thought of. As a close neighbor of Baishur City, the Shady Forest City players would certainly not be willing to lag behind in learning this advanced technology. In their spare time, it was common for them to go to Baishur City to collect large and small bags of white lime. However, after all, it took more than 6 hours to go back and forth, so this thing was still quite precious to the Shady Forest City players. They were reluctant to use it unless it was necessary. At this time, such an important scene, no one would be stingy. Each group of players had a small cloth bag in their hands. They grabbed a handful and sprinkled it, looking very much like Mao Mountain Taoist priests exorcising ghosts. And this move was indeed effective. Some of the thief players from Cloud City, as Deepwater expected, had already found the target and were secretly following and monitoring. If the thieves from Baishur City saw this strange scene, they would definitely understand what was going on. The players from Cloud City were at a disadvantage because they were outsiders. They didn't pay attention to the other party's anti-stealth. A few thieves were careless and were exposed. Some of the slower ones didn't even know that their skills had been interrupted and were completely exposed. They were still being carefree. It was a team of 10 people. It was really difficult to have any suspense when facing a thief. Reflected Years began to receive notifications from the thieves that were sent out. He was shocked. Not good, the other party seems to have anti-stealth. No way? So many of them have anti-stealth? The number of deaths showed that if the other party had this kind of skill, it wasn't just one person. Unsworn Sword didn't dare to believe it. This sentence reminded Gu Xiaoshang, who wasn't far from them. He came over and said that Baishur City had a type of white lime. Why didn't you say so earlier? Reflected Years said angrily. No one asked me. Gu Xiaoshang spread his hands. Hurry and call them back. Unsworn Sword said. No rush. Reflected Years was calm. It's very easy to hide in this forest. They're just at a disadvantage because they think that they're safe with stealth. Remind them to be careful. The scouting mission can still continue. They're all mercenary groups, right? Unsworn Sword whispered. Gu Xiaoshang wasn't far away. He didn't want his meticulous planning to be seen by the girl he liked. Reflected Years nodded proudly. And they don't have to pay extra. Ha! Unsworn Sword was relieved when he heard this. He looked like he didn't care about their lives. He waved his hand and said, then tell them to continue monitoring. Of course. Reflected Years ordered the other party leaders. Have you calculated how many people we've lost so far? Unsworn Sword asked Reflected Years. 146 people. Reflected Years said. Including those who didn't come to the mission at the beginning and those who were too timid to cross the Black Dragon Mountain range. But most of them died in the battle at Shady Forest City. Damn it. That guy, I'll find a chance to teach him a lesson. Unsworn Sword was furious. He was still angry when he thought of water depth. What about the mercenary group's losses? This? I didn't calculate it in detail. I think it's about the same as us. Reflected Years said. The mercenary group had fewer people than Reigning Four Seas, but their losses were about the same. It was clear that Reigning Four Seas had a strong sense of self-preservation. The two of them discussed this in whispers. Although the mercenary group knew the purpose of hiring them from the beginning, it was not good to make a ruckus. While the two discussed sneakily, Water Depth was also understanding the situation. Just as Reflected Years expected, after the thieves knew that the other side had anti-stealth, they began to carefully hide. It was not easy to be discovered in such a forest. After receiving the report of the number of thieves eliminated, Water Depth immediately understood that the other side had begun to pay attention to hiding. There was no direct way to deal with this. They could only move and search, and it was a little bit of luck. However, since they grew up in the forest of Shady Forest City since level 0, the players of Shady Forest City were very familiar with the forest and this kind of sneaky strategy. In comparison, the players of Cloud City were too inexperienced. The thieves who carefully hid were still constantly being caught and killed by the players of Shady Forest City. Of course, there were also those who escaped with their speed. However, Reflected Years' face was getting uglier and uglier. The other side was obviously cleaning up the thieves to hide their movements. They did not know what kind of conspiracy or trap was waving at them. Chapter 331. The Reflection of Years sent out a total of 20 thieves in the first wave, but they were wiped out one by one under the sweep of the Forest Shade players. When there were only 3 left, the Reflection of Years called out to the mercenary leaders to send more people. Of course, the leaders realized that this was a cannon fodder mission with no return, and they began to shirk responsibility, claiming that the thieves in their mercenary group were all dead. The Reflection of Years clearly saw that there were thieves in the mercenary group, but he went up to personally command them, and the thieves had to wait for the leader's orders. When he went to the leader told him that the thieves were all dead. This was nothing more than another disharmony in their lousy team. The Reflection of Years looked up at the sky and sighed that the morals of the world were deteriorating day by day, and that the quality of the mercenaries had been eaten by dogs. But when the Reflection of Years saw these people volunteering, his heart was very painful because these mercenaries were too quality. They would shout for money as soon as they helped you do some work. The Han family young master approached the Reflection of Years with a faint smile and said, "Don't you need us to do it? You only have one thief. What can you do?" The Reflection of Years rolled his eyes. "Of course we're going to do something big." The Han family young master smiled and said, "Let's go and give those guys a head-on blow. What do you think? Can we?" The Reflection of Years was doubtful. He didn't doubt the strength of the child elite group, but in this special environment, most people didn't have the confidence to play this kind of ghostly guerrilla warfare with the Forest Shade players. The Reflection of Years was one of them. "If you can't, You naturally won't get the mercenary fee. What do you have to lose? The Han family young master said. What's the price this time? The reflection of years asked. 30 gold coins for each person killed, the Han family young master said. How can this be? How do I know how many people you killed? The reflection of years said. You can follow us. The Han family young master invited. Just keep your eyes open and count. You don't have to do anything, the Han family young master said. Is that so? Time's reflection was visibly moved. After thinking for a moment, he made a decision on the spot. Then it's decided. Go there and wait for us. We'll be right there. Han family young master pointed at a random place and went to gather people. Not long after, he saw a few fellows from the child elite group walking over in an abnormally lazy manner, discussing the mission. 30 gold coins per kill? Usually, teach Parky a lesson mission costs more than this. Brother, you said. Teach Parky a lesson was a code word exclusive to Cloud City, specifically referring to PK assassination missions. 30 for 1 kill, 300 for 10. Motherfucker, those brats earned 300 each for being a mop. That's discrimination against us. Unscathed in battle said. You can't say that. Imperial Heaven Shinming said, they can be considered to have become famous overnight, and as celebrities, their appearance fees are naturally higher. Haha. The few of them laughed. Sword Ghoul was the only one who had a serious attitude as if he was carrying out an important mission. On the other hand, Gu Fei seemed to be in a bad mood. After a while, he raised his head and muttered, When can I go offline today? Why are you thinking about going offline? You're so useless. Someone on the side scolded Gu Fei. This is a big deal. It's a rare opportunity. Brother Qianli doesn't seem to be in high spirits. But this is a good thing for us. The person who spoke was actually drifting. His two helpers, who wrote love with his left hand and handsome with his right, stood on the side. Motherfucker, this is a real battle, not picking up girls. Be serious. There were also people who were lecturing as they walked, accompanied by booze. Naturally, it was Sakurazuka Tsukio and his brothers who didn't know what to do. You guys are? Reflection Years was confused. Oh, I went back and casually talked about it. I didn't expect so many people to be interested in this gold farming mission, so everyone came, Han family young master explained. Apart from their group, there were other players coming over as well. Gold farming mission. Reflection Years was in a daze. He felt as if he had fallen into a trap again. Looking at these mercenary players who had been on the verge of death when he ordered them around, but now they were all lively and lively. Reflection Year's heart was broken. By the way, if you want to confirm the number of people, I'm afraid you can't do it alone. Call a few more people to keep an eye on them. Han family young master seemed to be kindly reminding Reflection Years. Yes, it's best if I have a priest with me. Drifting nodded. Obviously, they had already learned how to operate this mission from Han family young master. Give us a few pretty girls. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka's brothers shouted. Do you think I would use this method to cheat you of your money? Slim Waist Dance glared. Obviously, she was going to act alone and didn't want a follower. Let's get an archer. Let's get a priest. We want a priest too, a female, the shouts continued. Reflection Year's face was full of tears, but he had to send a supervisor. Otherwise, with the quality of these people, they would probably come back and say that they had wiped out the entire guild. After assigning the supervisors, the players shouted, Go, get rich, and disappeared into the forest in different directions. Reflection Year's face was as ugly as tree bark. At this time, the first battle broke out in the southwest. The shouts only lasted for a few moments before disappearing. Obviously, the two sides had quickly turned into a sneak attack and hide. Shouting in this kind of battle was, of course, suicidal. The forest maintained its silence as the battle broke out one after another. Occasionally, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard, or the sparks of spells could be seen. This scene was extremely strange. Everyone knew that several battlefields had opened up in their vicinity, but there was not the slightest sound that a battlefield should have. Were the PKs between the players in Forest Shade City usually carried out so quietly? The only one who acted carelessly was the child elite group. The 6 guys walked arrogantly in the forest, making a lot of noise, and from time to time made fun of Reflection Years who was with them. Reflection Years' mood was really conflicted. He really hoped that a fierce sneak attack would come out and burn these 6 guys to ashes, but he was with them. If they were to die, he was afraid that he wouldn't survive either. Just as he was worrying, Gu Fei suddenly shouted in a deep voice, "Someone's there." Then he saw him turn around and point in a certain direction, then disappear with a chant. There was indeed a person hiding behind the tree. He had just stretched his neck to peep at the situation, not wanting to be immediately noticed by Gu Fei. But he only heard Gu Fei shout, "Someone," not knowing that he was talking about him. While he was still thinking about which guy was exposed, Gu Fei had already teleported behind him. The poor guy was still hiding behind the tree cautiously. Gu Fei, who was eager to go offline, was not in the mood to dawdle. He didn't even say hello and directly cut the person from behind. At the same time, because of this large displacement, Gu Fei had already caught a glimpse of the other 2 guys hiding behind the tree from the corner of his eye. But these 2 also saw Gu Fei at the same time. As a result, their first reaction was not to seize the opportunity to attack, but to choose to hide. Both of them shrank their necks, twisted their bodies, and went around to a place where Gu Fei couldn't see. But the mage players in Cloud City had always been throwing spells without seeing the enemy, and Gu Fei was also educated. At this time, he pointed his sword to the left and chanted, then pointed to the right and chanted, respectively throwing a Skyfall fire wheel and flaming tree 1,000 layers flames, then came out from behind the tree. "How is it?" Sword Demon and the others asked. "There's no more power left," Gu Fei said. "Who asked you that?" Everyone despised. As soon as the voice fell, Gu Fei's super slow spell had already exploded on both sides in succession. Not to mention that the opponent didn't see Gu Fei throw spells to both sides. Even if they saw it, they wouldn't dodge. Because one spell couldn't kill people, they could just grit their teeth and hold on. This was a habit formed by Forest Shade players to hide themselves. Unfortunately, this time they encountered Gu Fei, and they were thieves, lurkers, or mages. All of them were people with low HP, and there weren't many who could withstand a great spell from Gu Fei. At this time, Gu Fei nodded and said to the Reflection of Years, 5. "How do you know?" Although the Reflection of Years was standing here, he didn't see anything. Similarly, he thought that Gu Fei just threw spells, but in fact, he didn't see anything. "Because my PK value increased." Gu Fei told him that he felt that the Reflection of Years was really too inexperienced. Without waiting for the Reflection of Years to reply, Gu Fei suddenly took out his pocket, waved his hands left and right, and threw out 2 small daggers. The 2 thieves were smashed and revealed. Sword Demon, Brother Yu, unscathed in battle, Yutian Shinming, the 2 of them each chose one to attack. They were accurate and experienced, and the thieves who were revealed had no time to hide back into the forest. "Another 2. Young Master Han didn't wait for them to hang up and announced, "Does what I didn't see count?" The Reflection of Years summoned up the courage to say this. The mercenary group was doing things for them, and excessive distrust really hindered unity. The Reflection of Years no longer doubted the ability of the child elite group to complete the task, but he was very suspicious of their character and whether they would be honest in the process. He felt that he had to be strict with these cunning guys. For example, just now, based on the increase in PK value, Gu Fei judged that he had killed 5 people, or maybe only 2 or 3. Han Family Young Master waved his hand and used a healing spell on one of the thieves, then signaled the 2 who attacked to not kill for now. "How many of you died?" Han Family Young Master asked the thief. 5. The thief answered casually. Obviously, he didn't feel that this was something that needed to be kept a secret. Han Family Young Master shrugged at the Reflection of Years. "You see, there are witnesses." Chapter 332. Reflection Years hunted with the child elite group and gradually realized that there was a reason for these guys to be so ostentatious. Qianli Drunk's skill didn't seem to be just anti-stealth. He could also detect those guys who were hiding behind some trees and peeping at them. The sneak attack tactics of the Forest Shade players seemed to be very unreliable in front of this guy. Moreover, this person was too strong. Once, 4 of their group of 7 accidentally stepped into a trap. The other team of 10 thought that they had the upper hand and jumped out to eliminate them with cheers. In the end, 7 of them were killed by Gu Fei alone, and the remaining 3 fled in panic. This kind of strong performance made even their own people jealous. 720 gold coins. Han family young master also fell into a trap, but his demeanor didn't diminish. He reported to Reflection Years with a smile. That's right, since they came out to sweep until now, they had eliminated 24 opponents. There was no suspense in the battle. The suspense was when they would meet the enemy. Reflection Years felt like he was playing a very old mind-stepping battle game. In addition to the child elite group, the other groups also had their own gains in their own ways. In terms of drifting, he had spell damage that didn't lose to Gu Fei. What was more frightening was that his continuous casting ability was much stronger than Gu Fei's. After luring out the enemy's position, 2 large area of effect spells blasted, and the enemy was already half dead. Then, a strange ice shadow spell fooled the opponent. Those who fought the illusion naturally wasted time, giving drifting time to finish the cooldown of the spells. As for those who were lucky enough to directly come into contact with the real body, after a red lotus, they died faster than those who were fooled by the illusion. If there were any unexpected situations, the 2 old drifting partners, right love left hand and right handsome right hand, would resolve it. The battle also went very smoothly. When the child elite group eliminated 24 people, the 3 of them also killed 17 people. In addition, the outstanding result was Thin Waist Dance. The only thing she had to worry about was not stepping into the trap. As for being stabbed by a thief in stealth or being attacked by a mage, she wasn't afraid of that with her strong equipment. She used this method to lure out her opponent and then deal with him. However, because she was worried about traps, she couldn't run to her heart's content, bearing this greatest advantage. Her efficiency seemed to be a little low. At this time, he had only killed 7 people. But don't forget that she was alone. Other than Gu Fei, almost no one else could achieve such a result. Apart from that, the other mercenary groups didn't have such an outstanding chance of winning. Those who were slightly sharper could still win or lose against their opponents, but most of the passer-level experts were no match for the Forest Shade players in this forest at all. They were constantly sent back to the city. Naturally, the reigning the 4 Seas players who had tagged along were also dragged into this mess. They regretted their decision to sacrifice their lives for money. Unfortunately for them, they had already resurrected in Whitestone City. Among them, the most unusual ones were Tsubasa Sakuratsuka and the others. This group of wretched fellows wanted an eye for an eye. After setting up a trap area, they prepared to wait for the rabbit to come to them. In the end, perhaps it was bad luck, but no one passed through this area. Behind the trees and in the grass, the hunters themselves were almost transformed into flowers and grass. At last the rustling of the grass signaled the arrival of someone, and in their excitement they saw a man foolishly walk straight into their trap and be caught with a flop. "We finally caught one," they shouted excitedly. Everyone rushed out, drew their bows, knocked their arrows, and brandished their staffs. The player who had been caught was so frightened that he almost cried out, "Who are you people? Who are you people?" This question was a little strange. When 2 armies faced each other, would there be a need to ask who the opponent was? The suspicious Tsubasa Sakuratsuka looked at the guy's equipment and his heart skipped a beat. He used an appraisal skill and asked blankly, "Who are you?" "I'm just passing by. What are you guys doing? I'm a newbie. I don't have any money or equipment. Don't kill me." The person was very anxious. Newbie? Everyone appraised. He really was a newbie. He was only level 12. Everyone was speechless. The trap will disappear on its own when the time comes. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka waved his hand helplessly. Everyone looked at each other. Fireball suddenly slapped his thigh. "Fuck, our team is still moving forward. Those who are up to no good will definitely follow their pace and move around nearby. We're so far behind now. What can we do if we lay in ambush here? Tsubasa Sakuratsuka felt that this was reasonable and felt a little embarrassed. It was mainly because Boundless Mangmang had been lying here with them for a long time. This made Tsubasa Sakuratsuka very sad. He hurriedly explained, "It seems that there was a small error in our strategy." Boundless Mang smiled disapprovingly and said, "This situation is also very good. We've evaded the surveillance of those guys. We can take this opportunity to find the location of the main city and then tell them the exact coordinates. They can use the fastest speed to get out of this dangerous situation." Everyone heard that this was indeed a good idea. Just as they were about to set off, Boundless Mangmang showed wisdom that was a head higher than them. He walked towards the newbie player who had mistakenly fallen into the trap. "Brother, which direction should we go to Forest Shade City?" This question was definitely at the level of dispelling the clouds and seeing the clear sky. With the terrain of Forest Shade City, even the local natives couldn't determine the road according to north, south, east, and west after entering the forest. Where the city gate was, they absolutely had to rely on coordinates to locate it. This was even more so for newbies. In order not to get lost, the main coordinates were recorded in a notebook. At this time, he took out a small notebook and showed it to Boundless Mangmang. "How many city gates does your main city have?" The guys who came up to watch exclaimed. The newbie's notebook had a whole page of entrance coordinates marked. "Forest Shade City isn't like other main cities. You'll know when you get there." The newbie replied. "Thank you, I'll copy it." Boundless Mangmang took out his own small notebook and copied all the other parties' entrance coordinates. In the time it took to copy, the trap clip on the newbie's foot had already fallen off. "Sorry to trouble you." After returning the notebook, the newbie left in doubt. Looking at the coordinates, the nearest one. Just go this way." Boundless Mangmang took the small notebook and led the way. "Be careful of traps." Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was very concerned and rushed to the front. He took a wooden stick and began to clear the mines. Then quickly informed them. Someone suggested. "Not yet." Boundless Mangmang shook his head. "Let's go take a look first." The other party is only monitoring the movements of our large forces. They don't know the existence of our small team. If we get to Forest Shade City first, we can see if they have other traps. Boundless Mangmang said. "That makes sense." A group of people echoed and walked towards the coordinates marked on the small notebook. At the same time, Water Depth had already received the news that the other party had begun to carry out small-scale counterattacks. But overall, it was actually the Cloud City side that suffered heavy losses. Among them, only the Child Elite Group, Drifting Trio, and Slender Waist Dance had outstanding results. Obviously, they relied on their absolute strength to make up for the disadvantage of fighting in the forest compared to the Forest Shade City players. Water Depth was also not in the mood to get entangled with this group of strong people. He called for everyone to remember the characteristics of these three groups and avoid them. The Child Elite Group killed 24 people and then eliminated 2 people to increase their score to 26 people. Since then, they hadn't encountered any more enemies. And the 2 people who were eliminated also seemed to be alone. They didn't see their partners come out to cooperate with them. This was very different from the situation when they encountered the enemy before. They also quickly realized that the other party was deliberately avoiding them. "Looks like this is the number," they said to Reflection of Years helplessly, meaning that they were ready to settle the bill with him. Reflection of Years' expression didn't look good. Every time Gu Fei and the others killed someone, his eyelids would twitch. But the worst news was that apart from the 3 groups, the rest of the people were defeated. Although Reflection of Years didn't care much about the life and death of these mercenary players, he was still very worried when the area of death was relatively large. And after dealing with the Cloud City players who intercepted and harassed them in the outer circle, the Forest Shade team had already come into contact with the main group and began to continuously harass them. Spells were thrown here and there, arrows were shot here and there, a trap was suddenly found on the ground, and the figure of a thief suddenly slid past the team. Although the above didn't cause any fatal damage, it was a constant test of the endurance of the Cloud City players. Some people lost their cool and chased after the direction of the other party's attack, wanting to fight back. There were many people who went, but they couldn't see any traces of the other party. There were few people who went, and in the end, there was no trace of them. The arrow formation was still terrifying, but the other party's harassment was 360 degrees, and the arrow formation couldn't take care of everything. It must be known that the power of the archers was only effective when there was a certain number of people. If there were less people, the arrow formation wouldn't be able to form, and then it would be no different from ordinary archers. Sword of No Oath was already on the verge of collapse. If you ignored these harassment, he would quickly gather his forces and give you a big wave. If you ignored him, he would immediately disperse and disappear into the dense forest. After a few rounds of exchanging blows, if calculated according to the number of casualties, there was no clear winner. However, the Forest Shade City players had the initiative, and they had the psychological advantage. Moreover, they had achieved their goal, to slow down the advance of the Cloud players. Therefore, it could be said to be a complete victory. Each of the Cloud City players had a depressed heart. If possible, they would definitely burn the entire forest. At this time, the Child Elite group, Drifting, and the others who were floating outside all returned. None of them cared about the situation at hand. The first thing they did when they returned was to find Sword of No Oath to ask for money. 26 people, 780 gold coins, announced the Han family young master. 18 people, 540 gold coins, announced Drifting. 9 people, 270 gold coins, announced Slender Waist Dance. The other survivors also had 1 or 2 or 3 results, and at this time, they also came over to ask for money. Sword of No Oath finally exploded, and with a serious face, he scolded, "Everyone, the situation is critical right now. Can everyone put down the small profits at hand and work together to overcome this difficulty?" "What difficulty is there? A little harassment won't make a difference. Soldiers come with arms, water comes with an earthweir. Don't you understand this?" said the Han family young master. Chapter 333. Repeated harassment, but it didn't cause any significant damage. The other party's purpose is obviously to slow down our pace. There must be some other arrangement to buy time, Reflection of Years said with a dark face. Then guess what the arrangement is? Han family young master laughed. There must be an ambush ahead. Reflection of Years' eyes were deep. You've guessed it? Then why don't you guess if there's anyone who knows that there's an ambush ahead and still continues forward? Han family's young master said. No matter which way we go, the opponent will always grasp our movements. Reflection of Years was not in a good mood. He remembered that originally, the Child Elite group and the others were dispatched under the banner of eliminating the surrounding spies. But in the end, it felt like they earned money, and the situation on their side didn't change at all. The money was really wasted. If they can arrange an ambush at any time by grasping the movement, then why do they still want to delay? Han family young master laughed. Reflection of Years was speechless for a moment. From this, it can be seen that no matter what his arrangement is, it will take time. So, if we suddenly make a big change in direction, they will be caught off guard, Han family young master said. Easy for you to say. What if we can't find the main city after the big change? Sword Without Oath said. How can it be? Look, someone has found the main city. Without waiting for Han family young master to finish speaking, Reflection of Years' face suddenly showed a look of surprise. It's Tsubasa Sakuratsuka. This kid actually found the main city. Found the main city? Where is it? How do we go? Sword Without Oath's spirit was lifted. It had been a night, and this news made him feel a little happy. They said there are many entrances to Forest Shade City. Just walk around. Reflection of Years said. What does that mean? Everyone was puzzled. Only Tsubasa Sakuratsuka and his party who had arrived at Forest Shade City knew this meaning. Forest Shade City, located in the depths of the dense forest, was impressively different from the main cities like Cloud City, Moonlit City, and Baishur City, which had high walls and 4 regular entrances to the north, south, east, and west. It could basically be said to be one with the forest. Towering trees could be seen everywhere in the city, and the streets of various sizes in the city were directly connected to the forest. In the vast expanse of wilderness, the specimen was impressively the coordinates of all the street entrances on the border of Shady Grove City. Such a main city, as long as one came to its side, then one could enter anywhere. It wasn't like Cloud City, where you had to find the city gate after reaching the city. After understanding the situation nearby, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka informed the reflection years of this great news. Great, we're not far from here. After Tsubasa Sakuratsuka asked the reflection of years for their current coordinates, he pointed out the nearest way. The gloominess on the reflection of years' face had already been swept away, and he happily announced to the people around him, "Go this way." Time's reflection was already pointing. While Unsworn Sword relayed the order to his team leader, he hurriedly made an announcement in the guild channel. Everyone immediately boiled over. After tossing and turning all night, this was finally the time they had been looking forward to. Everyone spat on the ground, commemorating that they could finally leave this damned forest. The team quickly adjusted their direction. Compared to the new route, the original direction of the Cloud City players seemed to also lead to Shady Grove City, but it wasn't as short as the new route. More importantly, the new route was full of confidence and hope, and everyone was excited about it. When we get to the city, if those guys dare to cause trouble again, we'll teach them a lesson. Someone had already begun to vow. In the team leader's channel, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was an idol. He accidentally caught a Shady Grove player in the trap, and he described it as if they had done it on purpose. He bragged about it to the team leaders in the channel. The more the Han family young master listened, the more he felt that something was wrong, and the expression on his face gradually began to change. Is there a problem? After all, Sword Demon was his old friend, and he noticed that his attitude was strange. The harassment is to delay time, which means that they need time to set up. As long as we temporarily change direction while moving forward, they definitely won't have time to adjust their ambush. That's why I've always wondered how their tactics could have such a big flaw. But now, there's suddenly a path that we have to take, and it's really suspicious. That makes sense. Sword Demon nodded repeatedly. Hurry up and notify reflection years, brother, you suggested. It seems a little late. Gu Fei suddenly raised his head. In a row of houses at the edge of Shady Grove City, Depth of Water was leaning against the wall with a short bow in his hand. A person stood beside him. It was the new level 12 player who had mistakenly fallen into Tsubasa Sakuratsuka's trap. Boss Depth, how's the setup going? The new player smiled and talked to Depth of Water. Not bad. Depth of Water nodded. Hee hee. The new player continued to smile. Depth of Water nodded knowingly, took out a money bag and handed it to him. The new player took it and opened it, and was very excited. Boss Depth, is there anything else you can take care of? Wait until you reach level 30. Depth of Water said with a smile. The new player also seemed to feel a little embarrassed. After scratching his head and saying goodbye, he ran away. At this time, a few people suddenly ran out from the side street. When they saw Depth of Water standing there, they immediately came over and asked, "How was it?" These people had died heroically in the previous ambush, and had just rushed over from the resurrection point. Everything went well. Depth of Water nodded. Will they be ambushed? Of course. Even if someone can react, I'm afraid it'll be too late. Depth of Water's face showed a victorious smile. Those guys are now waiting at the edge of the forest. What should we do with them? Someone asked, referring to Tsubasa Sakuratsuka's group. Don't worry about them. They've already made a great contribution. Depth of Water continued to smile. They've made their move. Depth of Water's companions suddenly perked up. Depth of Water nodded and looked towards the forest. From their position, they couldn't see what was going on in the forest. However, Depth of Water knew very well where the fight was taking place. As for the result, in the forest, the instant Gu Fei raised his head and spoke, the Han family young master already knew what they had bumped into. Brother Yu had already loudly warned everyone, there's someone in the trees. Be careful. While this warning had alerted the players in the clouds, the players in the shade of the trees had also heard it clearly. They hadn't made their move yet because the players in the clouds were still a bit away from entering their optimal attack zone. They didn't expect their opponents to have already noticed. Brother Yu's shout was a warning to his side, but to the opponents, it was equivalent to an order to make their move. This was a ground-to-air battle. Even though they had embarked on this joyous path, Reflection of Years didn't let down his guard. He had been carefully leading his arrow formation as they hurried forward. At this time, as soon as they heard Brother Yu's shout, they didn't wait for Reflection of Years' order and had already drawn their bows and aimed at the sky. It was a pity that the trees were full of leaves. They knew there were people in the trees, but they didn't know where they were. At this time, there was no time to search carefully. With Reflection of Years' order, the arrows were released. Almost at the same time, spells and arrows also fell from the trees towards the players in the clouds. The arrow formation, which was like a blind cat trying to catch a dead mouse, accidentally shot down a few people, but in comparison, the losses of the players in the clouds were even more worth crying over. This was originally the area that the players in the shade of the trees had planned. They were high up and attacked in a three-dimensional manner. In each area, several mages' spells overlapped and bombarded heavily. Those who were hit were instantly killed on the spot, without leaving a trace of life. Countless cinder 3,000 layers flames intertwined and burned together. In an instant, a large sea of fire spread out in the forest, leaving no survivors in the sea of fire. The 6 people from the child elite group were dumbfounded as they watched the changes in front of them. Their habit of being the last in line actually saved their lives at this time. The 6 of them, who were at the edge of the team, were not zoned into the attack zone. 3 meters in front of them, the flames burned the players in the Cloud City clean, which made the 6 experts feel a lingering fear. With such a large area of effect attack, even Gu Fei's teleportation couldn't escape the burning area. Disperse, disperse. Unsworn Sword's face was ferocious, and his eyes were red as he roared. He was at the front of the team, and like the 6 people from the child elite group, he was also at the edge of the team. He wasn't hit by the spells and was lucky to survive. However, more than half of his elite archery team that had dominated the 4 seas had been destroyed by this explosion. The only thing that he was happy about was that Todd, who wasn't far from him, was also not hit. The quest to dominate the 4 seas had not failed. Reflection, are you dead yet? Feng Xing? Unsworn Sword commanded the evacuation of the crowd while looking for his left and right arms. Feng Xing quickly responded, but the answer he got from the Reflection of Time was a message. Fuck. The message was only one word, but one could imagine the bitterness and tears in it. Throughout this quest, Reflection of Years was probably the hardest in the guild. It was a pity that he didn't even have the chance to taste the fruits of victory. What a huge misfortune. What was even sadder was that Unsworn Sword didn't have the time to reminisce about Reflection of Years. After he hurriedly closed the message, he heard Feng Xing's angry roar, and a thief was thrown high into the air. Careful, there's a thief. Feng Xing shouted. Unsworn Sword focused his mind and charged to Todd's side, shooting a meaningful glance at the 3 heavy warriors left behind by Silver Moon. These 3 were responsible for protecting Todd, and they knew what to do at a time like this, so they immediately stood in a triangle formation to protect Todd. Unsworn Sword pulled out his sword with his right hand and his knife with his left. With a flip of his wrist, he swung it to both sides, and he really did hit a thief. Watch out for thieves! Unsworn Sword warned again. Under the wall outside the forest, Water Depth leisurely received the report of the situation. The ambush was a great success. The target was confirmed. Chapter 334. Even a mage like Gu Fei wouldn't be so exhausted after casting 2 spells. The mage's aerial bombardment was stopped because they only had 2 AoE spells at the moment. After using them continuously, they needed some time to cool down. There was also another important reason. The first wave of frightening damage was actually just a test. Just like the werewolves in Luminous Village, Deepwater's mission was to silence Todd. As for how many players they killed in Cloud City, It had nothing to do with the mission. Even though the two sides had been entangled for so long, Depth and the others still hadn't determined where their target was. At this moment, they finally recognized it. The person surrounded by 3 heavily armored warriors and guarded by unhindered the Four Seas Guild leader, Unsworn Sword, was definitely a key character in this mission. All the eyes hidden in the trees could see it clearly. All the mages had turned their staffs, and all the archers had turned their arrows. This wave of attack was the real goal of this ambush. The best attack zone designed by the Forest Shade players wasn't to deal the heaviest blow to the players in Cloud City, but to ensure that every corner of the opposing team was within their attack range. Only after confirming the target could they focus all their power to attack. Todd's position wasn't the best for them. A considerable number of mages couldn't attack him, but as long as their attack range was within reach, they were ready, gritting their teeth as they waited for their skills to cool down. Unsworn Sword in the Forest Shade slashed out a thief. Just as he was about to rush forward to finish him off, the thief didn't bother him at all and turned to run. This thief wasn't the only one. Several other thieves took the initiative to reveal themselves near him and Todd. None of them came up to attack. They all turned around and left. Not good. Unsworn Sword quickly realized something. He didn't have time to say anything. He turned to the side and used Second Charge. Second Charge. This was a skill unique to Unsworn Sword. It allowed the user to use the charge skill twice in a row before entering cooldown. The moment Unsworn Sword dodged, the brilliant flames in the sky and on the ground shone brighter than before. Unsworn Sword couldn't see how many mages were casting spells at this area. He could only let out a pained roar. This mission was probably over. No matter how strong those 3 heavy soldiers were, they wouldn't be able to withstand the simultaneous attacks of so many spells, right? The answer was just as Unsworn Sword thought. Although the spectral imprisoning shield of the 3 heavy soldiers was abnormally strong, it was a manifestation of the unique characteristics of the weapon. If they didn't use the shield to directly attack, they wouldn't be able to display its defensive properties. Let's not talk about how many mages were attacking at the same time. Even if there weren't that many, they could raise their shields above their heads to defend against the descending fire wheel. However, there was nothing they could do against the 1,000 layers flames of the Sync Tree. That's right, at that time, they had indeed thrown their shields on the ground and jumped up to defend against Cinder Tree 1,000 layers flames, but don't forget that at that time, their opponent was Gu Fei. The spell's activation was slow enough for them to throw their shields on the ground and then jump up. Apart from Gu Fei, it was really difficult to find a second person who could do such a complicated thing. Amidst the raging flames, the 3 sturdy bodies were finally incinerated. Because the 3 of them were able to persevere better than ordinary players, they didn't instantly turn into white light. From their faces, one could see the painful process of holding on. Unfortunately, this process only lasted for 1 or 2 seconds. The white light that made Unsworn Sword's heart ache finally rose. Even the valiant heavy soldier had been insta-killed, so how could Todd still be alive? When everything dissipated, Unsworn Sword didn't dare to open his eyes. He was waiting for the system to announce that he had failed the mission. However, this time, he actually received a pleasant surprise. The heavy soldiers were no longer there, but the ground was still burning. The players in the sky who hadn't been able to escape in time were all sacrificed. However, Todd, the disheveled and dirty prisoner who had been expressionless throughout the journey, was still as disheveled and dirty as ever after the baptism of the raging flames. He was actually still alive. Unsworn Sword was so shocked that he couldn't even close his mouth. However, he quickly reacted and rushed to Todd's side, grabbing him and running away. If Todd had resisted, he would have clearly caused a lot of trouble for Unsworn Sword. However, this NPC was very obedient, as if he was fully aware of being a prisoner. When Unsworn Sword grabbed him, he immediately followed and ran. Unsworn Sword waved his hand and shouted to the others, "Cover! Cover!" There was still a small portion of the Four Seas arrow formation left. There were also archers and mages among the surviving mercenary group players. These people took advantage of this opportunity to attack the sky. The warriors were also doing what they could, hugging the trees beside them and shaking them violently. They didn't think that this would become the most effective method of attack. In such a dense forest, the branches and leaves of every tree would be entangled together. Shaking any one of them would cause a relatively large area of effect. At this time, with so many people shaking at the same time, the rustling sound of the branches and leaves above the forest rang through the sky. Many players in the shade of the trees were caught off guard and fell from the trees. However, most of them reacted quickly and reached out to grab the tree trunk the moment they fell. However, their bodies were already exposed. As a result, the treetops of this small patch of forest were filled with players hanging here and there like fruits. It was an extremely strange sight. "Fuck, what is this mess?" The Han family young master was holding his forehead. With a bang, a mage fell from above his head and fell in front of him. In a flash of light, Gu Fei was quick and used the pocket sword drawing technique to instantly kill the mage. This was not the only effect of shaking the trees. The biggest effect of this move was to prevent the players in the trees from having a chance to attack again. Those hiding in the trees were either archers or mages. Although a large number of people held onto the trees and didn't fall to the ground or get hung from the trees, archers had to use both hands to shoot arrows. At this time, with one hand holding onto the tree to balance their body, how could they shoot arrows? As for mages, although they could cast spells with one hand, the problem was that except for instant cast spells, the other spells required the body to remain motionless while chanting. At this time, the trees were shaking violently, and everyone was trembling. Even if there was no big movement under their feet, there was a slight jolt because of the constant trembling. This small flaw did not escape the system god's attention. All the mages chanting failed. The players in Cloud City hadn't noticed this yet, but shaking the trees made a breakthrough change in the battle situation. This point was very obvious. The players who fell to the ground were killed before they could get up and run away. Those hanging from the trees became living targets, and the situation of the massacre was instantly reversed. At this time, Unsworn Sword also showed the qualities that a guild leader should have. While staring closely at Todd beside him, he calmly commanded all the players. Those who shook the trees, those who hit the targets, those who picked fruits. Everyone had something to do, and no one was idle. Deepwater, who was waiting for the good news of victory outside the forest, received the report and was naturally surprised. How many mages attacked at the same time? At least 50. 50 mages, each with 2 spells. That NPC is still alive? Looks like nothing happened. It's a little harder than I thought. Deepwater sighed. He expected that this NPC wouldn't be so fragile that he would die with a single touch. Otherwise, the task of protecting him would be too difficult for reigning the world. Therefore, he set up this elaborate trap, hoping to quickly concentrate his firepower after discovering the target and directly blast it into pieces. Who would have thought that even the simultaneous attacks of 50 mages wouldn't be able to kill this target? This NPC's HP was conservatively estimated to be at the level of a boss. What's the situation now? Can you still launch another wave? Deepwater hurriedly asked. We can't. The person who replied said, they're already shaking the trees. You found out about this method so quickly? As expected of the experts in Cloud City. Deepwater was very surprised. Players like them who had been immersed in the forest for a long time already knew that shaking the trees could completely block the attacks of the ambushers in the trees. At this time, they used this tactic to take advantage of the fact that the players in Cloud City weren't familiar with fighting in the forest, and also because they felt that they had the confidence to kill them in one hit. After all, if they succeeded in killing Todd directly, the other side would have already failed the quest. If the opponent was rational enough, it would be beneficial for both sides to stop fighting, shake hands, go have a drink, and curse the system god who designed this two-way quest. How fun would that be? Unexpectedly, the opponent thought of shaking the trees so quickly after failing to kill them in one hit, which also surprised Deepwater. In fact, he also thought highly of the players in Cloud City. Shaking the trees targeted the characteristics of the two classes in ambush at the top of the trees, blocking their attacks. This was something that the players in Cloud City didn't think of. Their thinking was very simple. People are in the trees, so I shake the trees to shake them down. It was that simple. Everyone on the trees, hold on. They don't dare to stay in the forest for long. Let them leave, Deepwater ordered. In fact, the players on the trees had already done the same. They all tightly hugged the branches around them. Apart from the warriors who continued to shake the trees, the rest of the players in Cloud City retreated in an orderly manner under the command of Unsworn Sword. At the edge of the forest, Tsubasa Sakuratsuka's group was still waiting with their necks stretched out, when they finally saw the figures of the players in Cloud City. What took you so long? Tsubasa Sakuratsuka proudly greeted them. He thought that he had done a great deed. Go to hell. The first player who rushed out saw Sakurazuka Tsawako with a face full of anger and reached out to push him to the ground. Chapter 335. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was just a pervert, not a coward. Being thrown to the ground for no reason, of course he was furious. He quickly got up and was about to fight with the other side. However, the other side didn't seem to have any intentions of letting him go. He reached out and grabbed him by the collar. Do you know how many brothers you've caused us to lose? I was too careless. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka thought to himself. In the heat of the moment, he forgot that he had a profession. At a time like this, he should have quickly pulled away. Why did he take the initiative to stick close to him? He was too irrational. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was still analyzing tactics. The other side's words didn't enter his ears at all. His brothers, on the other hand, reacted faster and hurriedly pulled the two apart. What's going on? Mang asked in confusion. His anger towards Tsubasa Sakuratsuka wasn't an isolated case. The players that came out from the forest all glared at him. Did you collude with that water depth guy? Someone roared. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka became even angrier when he heard this. He was even angrier than when he was thrown to the ground. He jumped up and shouted, Sun Zitsai and water depth are together. His voice was a bit louder and immediately became a weapon. Water depth wasn't too far away from here. Quite a few of his brothers were nearby. When they heard this, they were undoubtedly scolded by Tsubasa Sakuratsuka and were extremely unhappy. What happened? Mango asked with furrowed brows. Beautiful women were mysterious things. They had different effects in different situations. Sometimes they would be a catalyst, and sometimes they would be a bomb. For example, when Mango spoke again, the other side didn't yell. He calmly said, We were ambushed on the way here. After saying this, he glared at Tsubasa Sakuratsuka. What ambush? Mango hurriedly asked. The enemy ambushed us on a tree in our path. When we passed by, a large-scale magic attack was suddenly released. No one could dodge it, so we all died, the player said. How could this be? Tsubasa Sakuratsuka was stunned. He could imagine how great the losses would be if it was an ambush like this. Shouldn't I be asking you that? The other party looked at Tsubasa Sakuratsuka darkly, obviously still suspicious of him. It's none of his business, said Mang. It was all my idea. From the moment we met that newbie player in the forest, it seems like this is a deliberate trap. The other party looked at Tsubasa Sakuratsuka, then looked at the boundless forest, not knowing what to say. What the hell is going on? Suddenly, there was another roar. Another guy who had just come out of the forest squeezed his way over. He glared angrily at Tsubasa Sakuratsuka, and his other hand was grabbing another person tightly. It was Todd, the target of this mission. This person was, of course, the guild leader of reigning the four seas, Unsworn Sword. This is a trap. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka didn't know what to say. Although it was an unintentional mistake, a mistake was a mistake, and it was such a big mistake. It's nothing to do with them. I was too careless and got tricked. In comparison, Mang was much calmer. Who are you? Unsworn Sword looked at her. The ones in charge of contacting the mercenary groups were all Shadow Years, and Unsworn Sword was someone that even the leaders didn't know. Is it important who I am? Now isn't the time to find out who's responsible. There's a high chance that the people from deep waters still have traps around. Let's think about what to do next. It won't be too late for you to find out who's responsible after this, said Mango Mang calmly. That's right. Someone agreed. Gu Xiaoshang had just walked out of the forest and happened to hear this. He immediately walked over and looked at Mango Mang with admiration. Girl, which mercenary group are you from? I don't think I've seen you before. I'm not from any mercenary group. I'm just playing with friends, said Mango Mang. My name is Gu Xiaoshang. What's your name? Gu Xiaoshang extended his hand towards her. Mango Mang. The two women shook hands in an imposing manner. The group of men around them were all dumbfounded. Gu Xiaoshang was also confused. Mango Mang? The one from Moonlit Night City? That's me. Mango Mang nodded. Gu Xiaoshang, Unsworn Sword, and the other players in the cloud all looked at each other. Because of Silver Moon's disappearance, Mango Mang was mentioned many times in the description of Silver Moon's despicable life. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka didn't mention that this woman was actually in the group. In the story, Mang Mang was splashed with dirty water and abandoned. Everyone thought that she must be a sorrowful and resentful woman, but now that they saw her in person, they knew that it was not the case. In this chaotic situation, her calm appearance was better than most pure men. Before the discussion could continue, more and more players came out of the forest, and more people gathered. Unsworn Sword began to organize the people, until a large group of warriors slowly moved over while shaking the tree. What are you guys doing? Unsworn Sword was surprised. If we all stopped shaking the tree, wouldn't the other side's attack come again? A warrior replied. That's enough. If there were still people here, would we still be standing here unscathed? Unsworn Sword said. When the warriors heard this, they finally stopped shaking the tree. Everyone was a bit nervous. Has everyone come out? Unsworn Sword asked. Logically speaking, these warriors should be the last to retreat. He even thought that these guys might not be able to survive. Because as soon as they stopped shaking the tree, the attack from the tree would immediately start. He didn't expect these guys to think of a way to gradually stop shaking the tree until they were out of the other side's attack range. There are still people from the child elite group behind us. They say they're bringing up the rear, a warrior replied. Bringing up the rear? The enemy is coming? Unsworn Sword was nervous. He hurriedly organized a resistance. All right, it's all been taken care of. It's just a few thieves in stealth. The 6 people from the child elite group arrogantly appeared. This time, I'll let you off the hook for this small matter. The Han family's young master said to the Sword of No Oath very generously. Unsworn Sword didn't want to argue with him over such a trivial matter. He turned back to the team and shouted, Mercenary groups, take stock of your men. Unhindered, those who are still here, stand by the wall. The various team leaders immediately got to work, calling their own members to the front. The players from Unhindered walked down the wall, looking a bit dejected. Apart from that, there were quite a few players who didn't know what to do. Unsworn Sword went over to ask them, and they were all mercenary groups whose leaders had died. So, Unsworn Sword called Feng Xing over to temporarily command these guys who had lost their backbone. They only did a rough count of the members. When this huge team set out from Cloud City, they had a total of nearly 1,300 people. They only lost 100 or so people due to the fierce battle with the bandits when crossing the Black Dragon Mountain range and the timid retreat when crossing the cliff. After that, they didn't suffer any major losses. After entering the forest, they were constantly ambushed and counter-ambushed, and after the ambush just now, the number of people they lost was close to 600. Out of the 1,300 people in the team, there were only about 600 people left. Everyone's mood was heavy. Because everyone had a companion who had died in the process, apart from the child elite group, the 6 of them were safe and sound. Moreover, they were constantly filling up their pockets. Now that everyone else was mourning, the 6 of them didn't want to spoil the mood. But when they sneaked a glance at the Amethyst girls, they also had a particularly tragic expression on their faces. Yutian Shenming couldn't help but ask, Hey, you guys didn't suffer any losses, did you? During the ambush just now, The Amethyst girls were lucky enough to be with the lowest-ranked players and escape the disaster. Who said that? We lost the most people when crossing the Black Dragon Mountain range. One of the girls rolled her eyes at Yutian Shenming. Yutian Shenming was speechless. During the challenge of courage at the Black Dragon Mountain range, many of the Amethyst girls had indeed retreated, including Yutian Shenming's favorite grape. He originally thought that there would be many opportunities along the way to take advantage of them. Sigh, the gods are making fools of people. Yutian Shenming's mood was also heavy as he thought about it. Gu Fei's expression was the most sorrowful out of the six. After feeling the heavy atmosphere for a while, he finally couldn't help but ask, "Can we go offline now? Will I die if I go offline later?" Han family young master rolled his eyes. "There's still class tomorrow." Gu Fei said. "Bullshit, I've never heard of physical education class so early in the morning." Han family young master said. When they first met, Gu Fei had told Yutian Shenming that he was a teacher. After they got to know each other, it was inevitable that people would ask Gu Fei what kind of teacher he was. They all knew that he was a physical education teacher. "We have to do exercises in the morning. Have you ever gone to school?" Gu Fei said. "I have, but I've never done exercises." Han family young master said calmly. The surroundings continued to be silent. No one spoke, mainly waiting for Sword Without Oath to speak. As for Sword Without Oath, he was actually sorting out the situation of their guild. To be honest, he didn't care how many people they lost. He was more concerned about whether Todd was dead or not, and how many people they lost in Rampage. Clearly, he wasn't very good at this job. He still hadn't finished counting the number of Rampage players under the wall. But before the first wave subsided, another wave arose. Before Sword Without Oath could finish counting the number of people he was concerned about, someone from the mercenary group came to him. "Leader Sword Without Oath, we want to withdraw from this mission." Chapter 336. Silence. Deathly silence. The focus of everyone's attention. The one who said this was just a small character in the mercenary group. Unsworn Sword, who was counting, turned around in shock. Seeing this guy, he smiled calmly. "Tell your leader to talk to me." The man nodded. "Our leader told me to." Our whole group agreed. "We're withdrawing from this mission." Only then did Unsworn Sword take this seriously. He slowly stood up, his face already filled with anger. Withdrawing from the mission at this time was no different from adding fuel to the fire. Unsworn Sword's member count was mostly done. Currently, there were more than 300 of them. A rough estimate was that Unhindered still had around 400 players. Nearly half of them were gone. The mercenary group suffered even more losses. Originally, there were more than 500, but now there were only around 200 left. But the problem was that Unhindered's players had failed their mission and returned to Cloud City. As long as the mercenary group's Todd was still alive, their mission was not considered a failure. Moreover, they could revive in Whitestone City and reach Forest Shade City in 3 hours. The reason Unsworn Sword had hired so many mercenary groups was to prevent a situation like this from happening. Now, however, one of the mercenary groups wanted to withdraw from the mission. Unsworn Sword believed that he wasn't the only one who felt this was too much. But before he could say anything, 3 other mercenary group leaders or temporary representatives stood up. "We also want to withdraw." "You!" Unsworn Sword was so angry that he didn't know what to say. The other party's tone was firm. It seemed that they were just informing him and not discussing it with him. "Don't you think it's too much to withdraw at this time?" Many of Unhindered's players were indignant. At this time, someone stood up and said. In the end, one of the 4 mercenary groups that wanted to withdraw nodded and said, "Yes, we do have some apologies. So, our group has decided to refund the deposit in full." As he said this, he turned around and communicated with a few of his brothers. Everyone rummaged through their pockets, put together a bag of money, and handed it to Unsworn Sword. Different mercenary groups had different rules when it came to deposits. Sometimes, employers in a hurry to find mercenaries would also use this method to attract people to take the bait. For example, the Reigning the Four Seas quest had a rule where players had to pay half of the deposit in advance and the other half upon completion of the quest. Even if the guild failed the quest in the end, the deposit would not be refunded. However, it was the mercenary group that took the initiative to withdraw from the mission, something that had never happened before. Unsworn Sword could only hate the fact that there was no breach clause in the contract. When the other party returned the deposit, he did not reach out to accept it. Behind him, Feng Xing had already stood up and yelled angrily, "This is not about money. The problem is, aren't you being too untrustworthy?" Apparently, the man didn't feel that what he had done was glorious either. He didn't raise his head too high, and his eyes were sparkling. He didn't look at Feng Xing, sort of No Oath and the others, and said in a bland tone, "Sorry, we truly feel that we are not capable enough for this mission." "So you're scared?" Feng Xing sneered. In fact, anyone could imagine that there were people who wanted to retreat at this time. Apart from fear, there was no other reason. Scared? He didn't expect the man to show dissatisfaction at this word. After looking at Feng Xing, he continued with his gentle attitude. "This mission, to put it bluntly, we're here to be cannon fodder. We understand this principle. If we were really scared, would we accept this kind of mission?" Feng Xing was stunned. "Leader Unsworn, you should remember how you lured us into this mission, right? Just for the mercenary fees? Hee, I'm afraid none of our mercenary brothers here would have such little ambition. This mission requires us to go through 5 main cities. Right now, Moonlit Night, White Stone, and Shady Forest, we've already gone through 3 of them. In my opinion, our estimation seems to be a bit wrong. This mission doesn't have the extra rewards we imagined, and there's even a 2-way mission with high risk and 0 reward. After some discussion, we think that it's really hard for us to continue this mission. That's all I have to say. You guys can think whatever you want." After saying this, the player saw that Unsworn Sword still had no intention of taking his money bag. He bent down and gently put the money bag on the ground, then turned around and waved his hand, "Let's go." Several players immediately separated from the crowd and returned to the forest without looking back. The other 3 mercenary groups that wanted to leave felt that the brother just now had said everything he could, so they silently put their money bags on the ground, turned around, and left. Unsworn Sword was about to say something, but this action unexpectedly spread like a plague. One after another, 5 mercenary groups stood up, silently put down their money bags, and silently turned around to leave. "Hey you guys!" Feng Xing angrily wanted to chase after them, but he was pulled back by Unsworn Sword, who shook his head and said, "Forget it, let them go." Looking around again, Unsworn Sword said in a deep voice, "Is there anyone else who wants to leave?" The remaining mercenary groups looked at each other. Among them was the largest mercenary group in Cloud City, Black Hand Mercenary Group. Although their leader, Black Index Finger, had died, they did not retreat. At this time, Drifting was still in the group, calmly standing at the head of the group. After that, the girls of Amethyst Mercenary Group did not retreat. Other than the Child Elite Group, they were the only ones who did not suffer any damage. With how weak they were, this was practically a miracle. After that, the perverted men from the Great Hunt were also there. They did not suffer any damage in the forest battle, but their main losses were in Moonlit Night City. Other than that, there were 2 normal mercenary groups that did not choose to leave at this time. Of course, the 6 members of the Child Elite Group were also there. However, Unsworn Sword did not care too much about these 6 mercenary groups. Instead, he looked at the 7th mercenary group and very emotionally called out, "Little Shang." Ouch! Yutian Shenming immediately made a painful expression, as if he had been poisoned to death. "Don't call me that disgustingly, call me by my full name, Gu Little Shang." Gu Little Shang said angrily. "Thank you for staying." Unsworn Sword continued to be emotional. Even his own guild members could not stand it. Feng Xing coughed violently on the side. Other than these 7 guilds, there were also a few people who were stunned on the spot. They were the players of the Silver Moon Mercenary Group. Currently, they were truly a group without a leader. Even if the leaders of the other groups were not present, they were still in the channel, and the decisions were still made by the leaders. As for them, although Silver Moon was still in name, everyone had already ignored him. Even if he had something to say, no one would listen. For a moment, there were many different opinions in the channel, and so far, no one had come up with a plan. Unsworn Sword recognized these people and nodded to them, saying, "Everyone, I'm afraid that mercenary group can only be considered to exist in name. However, as long as you continue, I will still pay you the remaining half of the money." "For the 5 of us?" the 5 of them asked. The Silver Moon Mercenary Group had a total of 40 people. Originally, it was supposed to be split among 40 people. If it was given to 5 people, it was equivalent to raising the price. Unsworn Sword nodded. "Brothers who have just been sacrificed, as long as you are willing to continue, you can all get a share of the money." The 5 of them readily agreed. They did not dare to hide this information and relate it to the others in the channel. As a result, there were those who were willing to come and those who were not. This group of people was settled just like that. Unsworn Sword stared at the remaining mercenary groups and was about to say something when he suddenly saw Child Elite Group's Qianli walk out in a drunken manner. His footsteps were as silent and firm as the players who had left. "Fuck!" Unsworn Sword was enraged once again. He should have known that these people would definitely hit him when he was down and give up at this crucial moment. Gu Fei, who did not want to come out, said, "Leader Unsworn, is there anything else? If there's nothing else, hurry up and go offline." Go offline? Unsworn Sword was startled. He did not expect Gu Fei to come out and ask such a simple question. He did not even understand what Gu Fei was talking about. Why would such an expert say that he wanted to go offline at this time? "Yes, it's getting late." Gu Fei nodded eagerly, confirming that he was an anomaly. "Oh, go offline." Unsworn Sword snapped out of his daze and quickly said, "We still have to escort Todd to the dungeon and temporarily detain him. Let's hurry up." Everyone's expression immediately became alert. It was obvious that Water Depth and his group would not simply give up the mission just because they were out of the forest. However, in the town, the players of Cloud City would not be afraid of them at all. At the moment, they still had more than 600 people on their side, and there was no lack of experts among them. If Water Depth really wanted to fight to the death, then everyone would fight to the death. With this kind of indomitable momentum, the players of Cloud City officially entered Forest Shade City. Most of the houses and other buildings in Forest Shade City were made of wood, causing its village atmosphere to be more intense. In addition, the streets were filled with the figures of busy players. When a large group of strangers suddenly appeared, they would also be curious and vigilant, which was no different from other main cities. At this time, Brother Yu, who was good at observation and summary, quickly discovered a problem. "Did you notice?" Brother Yu said, "The player professions here are very unbalanced. Warriors, knights, priests, and grandmasters of combat, these 4 professions, how many of them have you seen along the way?" "Very few indeed." Everyone recalled. "The streets are full of archers." Everyone sighed. "And it seems that most of them are lurkers." Brother Yu said, "Did the surrounding environment create the abnormal development of the professions in this main city? No wonder many people said that they had friends in this city before, but they all moved away." "Hey, friends of Cloud City, how are you?" Suddenly, a voice came. Everyone turned around and saw Water Depth sitting cross-legged on the roof with a smile, one hand hugging his knees, the other raised and waving at everyone. Butterfly Knot, the number of chapters in the previous chapter is wrong, but this can't be changed. So, let us mourn the disappearance of Chapter 335. Chapter 337. Bitch! A loud roar came from Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka. Because he had fallen for Water Depth's trick, he had implicated a lot of people. Even someone as wretched as Tsubasa's Sakuratsuka felt extremely guilty and was too embarrassed to look others in the eye. All the members of the great hunting mercenary group were like this. Only Fireball remained calm and composed as if no one was around. He could be called the shameless king of the great hunting mercenary group. Tsubasa Sakuratsuka cursed as he fired. He really wanted to take Water Depth's head to absolve himself and his brothers of the crime. However, because he was too emotional, his shoulders and fingers were a bit stiff. This snipe was extremely out of control and missed Water Depths by 3 body lengths. Don't be in a hurry. Seeing that the other archers and mechanics were about to follow Tsubasa Sakuratsuka, Unsworn Sword raised his hand to stop them. At this time, he unexpectedly displayed his calmness. After all, this was a game. Killing Water Depths once wouldn't leave them without a leader. Apart from venting a bit of their anger, it didn't affect the overall situation of the quest. Unsworn Sword could clearly see this point. What are you trying to do? Unsworn Sword looked at Water Depths on the rooftop and asked. Hee, nothing much. I just came to see how many of you are still alive. Water Depths laughed, more than I expected. It won't be that easy to wipe us out. Unsworn Sword replied indifferently while giving out orders in the channel. The thieves have gone into stealth. Go take a look around. The thieves who suddenly disappeared were all noticed by Water Depths. He smiled and said, Don't worry, there's no ambush this time. Would you be so kind? Unsworn Sword didn't think much of it. Of course not. Water Depths laughed. This time, we're just using a different method. We're going to have a direct confrontation. As soon as he finished speaking, silhouettes flickered on the street in front of them. The Water Depths troops appeared in front of the people of Cloud City. They were all archers, arrows knocked on their bowstrings, ready to shoot at any moment. Your guild's arrow formation is quite sharp. Water Depths said leisurely, but don't forget, us lurkers can also fire arrows. As soon as he said, release the arrows, the group of archers blocking the way had already loosened their bowstrings. The sound of arrows was as dense as the rain. Some shot arrows while crouching, some shot arrows while standing, and some shot arrows in an arc like an arrow formation that traversed the 4 seas. Although their coordination and proficiency couldn't be compared to the arrow formation of the 4 seas, don't forget that this was the street. There was no way to dodge to the left or right, and there was no cover in front of them. There was no way up to the sky, and there was no door to the ground. It was a foregone conclusion that they would be shot. Heavy soldiers, frontline hold. Hurry up and move forward. Unsworn Sword hurriedly ordered. This order wasn't wrong. At this time, they could only continue moving forward. If they turned around, they would only be chased by the enemy and shot at their butts. In the game, there was a hard gap between the movement speed of the various classes. Other than thieves who could move quickly, no one could outrun archers. However, the opponent's firepower was too fierce. The 4 Seas arrow formation only had 150 players, while Shadowed City was filled with lurkers due to the abnormal development of the player profession. In Water Depths Guild, there were more than 400 players. Even with the support of a priest, the heavy-armored warriors couldn't last long under the barrage of arrows. White light continuously flashed at the front of the Cloud players. Don't rush. Archers move. Shoot at them. Unsworn Sword roared. This move was indeed effective. Although there weren't as many archers in Cloud City as in Shadowed City, fortunately, there were warriors in the front line, while Shadowed City's players were all shooting naked. The enemy's arrows had a great impact on them, and for a moment, the arrows weren't as urgent. But Shadowed City's attack wasn't limited to this. The rooftop also became lively, and it was even more terrifying than the archers in front, the mages. Both sides of the rooftop were full of mages, and they had already raised their staffs. If they were bombarded like in the forest again, it wouldn't be a dream for the Cloud players to be wiped out. Everyone shouted for everyone to pay attention to the mages. The archers who were covering the charge turned their arrows and began to shoot at the rooftop. The mages also cast their spells and bombarded the rooftop. The shots of the archers might be able to interrupt some of the mages' chants, but the bombardment between the mages was almost the same. Flames exploded on the rooftop and the street. Some people died, and some were still alive. The number of players on both sides was almost the same, But at this time, it was a long-range bombardment battle, and only the mages and archers could participate. The originally balanced class composition of the Cloud City players had become a flaw at this time. They didn't have more than 200 archers and mages, but the opponent had 600. The number of people seemed equal, but in reality, they were at a disadvantage. The geographical location was even more so. The Shadowed City players originally had a major flaw. Because of the imbalance of classes, they didn't even have a priest. But in the current situation, this disadvantage no longer had any decisive effect. Bandits, retreat. Find a way around and finish them off. Unsworn Sword shouted. They weren't a match for long-range bombardment, so they had to find a way to fight in close combat. The street in front of them was dozens of meters away, and it was difficult to rush over. Unsworn Sword could only make a prompt decision and let the bandits, who had an advantage in mobility, turn around and find an opportunity to fight. However, among the players, there were still quite a lot of capable people who could quickly find an opportunity to get close. The first to fly to the top of the wall was another core member of Reigning the Four Seas, Feng Xing. He dashed towards the wall, leaped up, and kicked downwards. He used the Grandmaster of Combat's Flying Swallow Slash. This kick did not hit anyone, but hit the wall instead. Borrowing the momentum of this kick, he actually flew up to the top of the wall. The upper room immediately punched a mage down, and then threw another one down. Feng Xing was obviously aware of the situation. At this time, there was no need to kill the enemy mages. As long as they destroyed their formation on the roof, there would be no big problem. However, the strength of one person was still too limited. The enemy mages quickly adjusted their position, and a large group of people used a small fireball spell with a little tracking effect to tease Feng Xing. In addition, there were also people controlling ice whirlwinds to try and pull him into it. Priests, 2 priests, keep an eye on him. Unsworn Sword shouted anxiously. The priests were in a panic. They had to support the warriors who were acting as shields, and at the same time, they had to take care of the players who were injured by the enemy mages. They were already the busiest among everyone, and now Unsworn Sword asked for a personal nurse. Fortunately, Feng Xing was not the only Grandmaster in the team. When the others saw Feng Xing's actions, they also received a hint and followed suit. In the end, none of them succeeded. Most of them did not fly up after hitting the wall with Flying Swallow Slash, but flew backwards. The one who was slightly closer to Feng Xing was the reborn Amethyst, Fiercely. This girl's body was moving upwards, but she did not grasp the rhythm well and did not take the opportunity to step on the wall, so she fell back to her original position. The Grandmasters of Combat got up and continued their practice. At this time, the second player in the cloud had already reached the roof. Gufei, of course, it was Gufei. There was no better way to reach the roof than his teleportation. After finding a good position, he waved his finger, and with a whoosh, Gufei was already in the room. In front of him was a person with a blade of grass in his mouth, calmly commanding the mages to deal with the potential threats that might fly up to the room. "Hey, brother, you won't kill me, right?" Water Depth saw that Gufei did not panic at all. "Why?" Gufei was confused. "If I'm not wrong, your PK value should be 29 right now. If it reaches 30, the consequences will be very serious." Water Depth laughed. He was very satisfied with this calculation. "So, you can't scare me away." "You're so funny." Gufei laughed. With a flip of his sword, several small fireballs flying towards him were all knocked down. "Good skills," Depth exclaimed. On the other side, Feng Xing had already been burnt to a crisp by these small fireballs. The rooftop was full of people from Forest Shade City. Of course, it was not convenient to use a large area of effect attack, but because there were so many people, it was still very easy to use small fireballs to attack one person. Who would have thought that there would be a freak like Gufei who could knock down 6 fireballs with a single swing of his sword? "Here comes the sword." Gufei took 2 steps forward and attacked Depth. "If you want to kill me, why don't you chant a spell?" Depth was still smiling. "Dual Flame Flash, Flash." Gufei shouted. His body spun in a circle, flames curling around him. As Gu Fei spun in a circle, a total of 6 mages around him were instantly turned into white light by Gu Fei. When the flames faded, he just happened to turn in front of Depth. Without waiting for him to react, he had already kicked out, right at Depth's chest. Depth took a few steps back, directly falling off the wall and onto the street. He stared at Gu Fei, dumbfounded. "You're not a mage, why would I waste my mana on you?" Gu Fei stood on the rooftop and looked at him, smiling. Then, he turned around and swung his sword left and right, chanting, "Heavenly fire wheel, descend. 1,000 layers of flaming tree, rise." Gu Fei's chanting could give anyone a chance to escape, but at this time, they were on the rooftop and space was limited. If they wanted to hide, they could only jump to the street. These people clearly understood how terrifying Gu Fei's spells were. Quite a few of them chose this path. Quite a few of them were confused and jumped down without thinking. As a result, they ended up on the street where the players in the clouds were. Words couldn't even describe how miserable their fates were. At this time, even though Gu Fei had no mana left, he could still advance and retreat as he pleased among the mages. They couldn't use AoE spells, so Gu Fei wasn't afraid of small fireballs. What was even better was that they were all mages, so their power was the same. But Gu Fei was still using a thief's ring that increased strength, so he still had the advantage in terms of strength against normal mages. He closed in on them and used the most efficient method to throw the mages off the wall. The mages' formation on top of the wall had already been messed up beyond recognition. Chapter 338. Half of the formation was wiped out by a single person. On the street, Deepwater was vomiting blood. She could only watch helplessly as Gu Fei walked confidently on the rooftops, pushing, kicking, tripping and knocking the mages around him, using all sorts of methods to bring them down. At this moment, Deepwater's biggest wish was to have a small cannon in her hands, and then directly blast this row of houses to the ground. What the eyes don't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. But reality was cruel. Not only did Deepwater not have a small cannon, but he also had to shout at the mages and tell them how to deal with it. In the end, his command, which he always thought was outstanding, was like a cold joke in front of Gu Fei's abnormal skills. Seeing his brothers turn around and look at him with eyes full of powerlessness and pleading, Deepwater's heart was broken. "Come down, all of you come down by yourselves," Deepwater secretly ordered. At the same time, he also sent an order to the mages on the opposite street. "When our people retreat, immediately burn the other side's roof to the ground." The mages who received the order felt as if they had been pardoned. They turned around and took the initiative to jump down the street. Gu Fei stood on top of the wall and waved at everyone with the attitude of a victor, causing everyone to be angry. "Heavenly fire wheel, descend. Fire 3,000 layers of flames, rise." On the rooftops and on the streets, all the mages in Forest Shade City sang loudly with a volume of more than 70 decibels. The magic used was really imposing. In the end, Gu Fei just waved his hand at everyone and said softly, "Teleportation move." No matter how fast a spell was, it couldn't be faster than teleportation. The roof was indeed burned into a sea of fire as Deepwater had hoped, but Gu Fei had already returned to the ground. Just in time. Gu Fei laughed at the vast expanse of trees. Deepwater raised his eyebrows. "You're lucky, you just happened to be next to me. It should be this way." Gu Fei strode towards the other side of the street. The rooftop was Feng Xing's main battlefield. Perhaps he had a greater continuous attacking power than Gu Fei, but sadly, the gap between Gu Fei and Gu Fei was way too huge. At the beginning, Feng Xing caught Gu Fei off guard, but after he showed off his power for a short while, he fell into a tight encirclement and was roasted by those mages. Unsworn Sword had called 2 professional priests for him, but in the end, it took a total of 4 priests to barely hold on. If not for most of the mages focusing their firepower on Gu Fei, he might not have been able to hold on. Gu Fei had just used teleportation, so he could not use it again for the time being. He also did not have the explosive leg strength like the Flying Swallow Slash, so he could only borrow the strength of others. He hurriedly ran towards unscathed in battle while shouting, "Cushion!" Unscathed in battle had done this before when they were climbing trees, so he was no stranger to it. He half squatted and crossed his arms in front of him. Gu Fei rushed over and took a step forward. Unscathed in battle got up and threw Gu Fei up. However, climbing a roof was different from climbing a tree. The branches on a tree were easy to grab, but climbing a roof did not have such a convenient place to grab. Moreover, there were enemies on top of the roof. If his movements were sloppy, he would fall with just a poke from a staff. Therefore, Gu Fei decided to borrow another force to go to the next level. He inhumanely bent his leg and stepped on Unscathed in battle's shoulder again. Only then did he step onto the roof as if he was going up a flight of stairs. "I'm coming!" Gu Fei shouted. The situation was urgent. Gu Fei did not want to show off his skills. It would be best if the mages jumped down after seeing him. That would save a lot of trouble. However, his opponents did not retreat so easily. They waved their staffs again and fought against Gu Fei. This time, no one used inferior fireball. Instead, everyone used ice whirlwinds and rushed toward Gu Fei. They didn't hesitate to sweep up their own people along the way. They knew that as long as they killed Gu Fei, they would be able to stand on the roof. Gu Fei saw that the row of ice whirlwinds had blocked off the roof. When he turned around, he saw the same row of whirlwinds behind him. He had been locked in an instant. He had no other way out but to jump back to the street. Just as he was about to do that, a firewheel suddenly fell from the sky and hit the row of ice whirlwinds in front of Gu Fei. After the judgment, the whirlwinds cancelled each other out. There was a big gap in the middle. Gu Fei dashed over. He looked down and saw drifting bowing to him. The speed of the ice tornado wasn't slow at all. The drifting mage's control was impeccable to be able to nullify it with the heavenly firewheel. The other mages lost their sense of security when they were in close range. Gu Fei, on the other hand, was full of energy. Learning from his previous experience of being pincered, Gu Fei no longer followed the rules of advancing layer by layer. Pushing left and right, Gu Fei plunged into the crowd and wantonly shuttled through the crowd. Not to mention the ice whirlwinds, some rare lightning mages wanted to give Gu Fei a lightning strike, but they could not lock on to the target. The lightning spell was fast, but it was also because of its speed that the system did not give this spell any help in locking on to the target. When attacking a fixed target, this spell would hit the target 100% of the time. As long as the spell was cast, no one would have time to react. However, when the target was moving, the requirement for the player was very high. If the player's hand trembled a little, the lightning might miss the target. Gu Fei kept moving in the crowd. He could be described as appearing and disappearing from time to time. The lightning mages cast 2 lightning strikes, but they did not hit the target. The attack of the mages here was stalled by Gu Fei. In the end, there were more mages on the opposite roof. These guys were like ghosts. When Gu Fei left, they climbed up again. Gu Fei only knew how to teleport. He did not know how to clone himself. After killing one side, the other side would show up again. He did not have any spells. He could only use his fists, kicks, and weapons. It was easy to get people down the roof, but it would take a long time to kill them one by one. Everyone realized that the situation was still very unfavorable for Cloud City. Gu Fei could only be said to have achieved harassment, but he could not completely eradicate the opponent's attack. To solve this problem, the only way was to convert mana for Gu Fei in the middle of the battle so that he could maintain his lethality. This idea made the people of the Child Elite group shudder. If they really did this, how much PK points would Gu Fei have to bear? Could it be that after this battle, this guy's PK points would be in the triple digits? While everyone was thinking about it, there was suddenly a commotion in the archer camp of the Shady Forest City players. When the players shouted for someone, their neat and orderly team was suddenly torn in the middle. Dozens of heavily armed knights with swords and shields squeezed out of the archer formation and lined up neatly. Fuck? What the hell? The players of Shady Forest City cursed. This group of guys lined up neatly and blocked all of them behind them. The attack on the Cloud City players was interrupted just like that. Warriors! After the team lined up, this group of people did not leave. A captain actually stepped out to speak. The players of Shady Forest City who were stuck at the back complained and wanted to squeeze out, But this group of guys stood straight and didn't move, not leaving a single gap. The players did not dare to be rough. What would happen if they took the initiative to attack the guards? Of course, there would be people who were curious about this kind of thing. So far, the answer was death. As for the strength of this group of guys, Unsworn Sword had personal experience. His guild of more than 700 people had been beaten to the point of wetting their pants in terror by a mere few dozen players. The system's underlings were simply illogical when they were tyrannical. Provoking these people for no reason, the first time could be said to be out of curiosity, but if there was a second time, how retarded would that be? However, this group of guys suddenly appeared and intercepted the path of the Shady Forest City archers, obviously helping the Cloud City players in disguise. Unsworn Sword did not miss this opportunity and quickly led the team forward. So by the time they reached the side of these guards, they were only a thin layer away from the archers. Of course, the archers did not dare to fight at such a distance. Seeing that the opponents were already close, they helplessly chose to pull away. So at the intersection, Unsworn Sword led the group to make a perfect turn, temporarily escaping this predicament. Unexpectedly, Deepwater was not in a hurry to lead the group in pursuit because they were witnessing a legend. If the PK value exceeded 30, they would be killed on the spot by the guards, and their level would drop by 5. This setting had been announced long ago, but no player had ever challenged this limit. Today, someone finally took the historic step. For justice, for honor, warriors, fight. After the captain finished speaking, he nimbly turned around, pulled out his sword, and pointed forward. Advance! Some people were looking at this group of guards, and some were looking at Gu Fei, who was alone on the roof. Deepwater had already ordered the mages on that roof to leave. He did not know how this group of guards handled the case, and it was possible that there would be accidental injuries in the chaos. The mages of Shady Forest City occupied the top of the wall and the street, looking at Gu Fei with a smile. "Kid, continue being arrogant," someone shouted. Gu Fei did not speak. He took an apple and slowly nibbled on it, while paying attention to the actions of this group of main city guards. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, the guards slowly approached. It was not like the usual players who were running with their lives on the line when they fought and chased each other. Their simple and powerful steps showed the unreasonable dominance that only the system could have. The atmosphere was heavy. After the players of Cloud City escaped, they temporarily stopped in their tracks and watched from afar. The archers of Shady Forest City who had retreated far away also came back to watch the show. Gu Fei was still calmly nibbling on the apple. Although the guards were still on the street, they were already approaching. They had mages with Deepwater by their side. Everyone consciously made way for the guards, looking forward to the guards cutting Gu Fei into pieces. The guards finally made their move. The seemingly heavy one-handed sword made a whistling sound as it slashed down. A mage fell. But the guards were still on the street at this time. The one who fell was Deepwater's mage. He was not dead, but he had been thrown to the ground and pressed on the shoulder. Gu Fei laughed. "Do you understand the rules of PK? If you have a PK value above 20, it will be troublesome if the guards encounter you." Chapter 339. There were many players with PK experience in the game, but few of them took the high-end route like Gu Fei. Ordinary people fought and killed, and their PK value was basically within 10, unless it was a relatively large-scale group PK. The artillery mage in the team might accumulate a relatively high PK value, but it was rare for them to break through 20. Unless they were like Gu Fei, who could insta-kill a level mage, or under some special historical circumstances, they would be able to get 20+ points from a PK. For example, in today's battle, the mages on Shady Grove's side concentrated their firepower in the ambush and wiped out nearly half of the players in Cloud City. There were at least 500 or 600 people, which was converted into PK value of 500 to 600 points. If it was distributed in units of 20, there would be 25 to 30 places. Of course, in fact, so many PK value would be shared by everyone. However, because they achieved the instant kill effect by stacking their spells, there would always be some lucky ones who encountered more of the last hit. The acquisition of PK value was not like killing a boss, where the amount of damage dealt during the process was calculated to determine the final owner of the boss. PK value only looked at the last hit, and whoever did the last hit, the PK value would fall to that person. At this time, there were still 7 or 8 mages in Shady Grove City with PK value over 20. As for Gu Fei, he didn't have any detailed research on the PK rules, he only had experience. When the PK value was above 20, he couldn't attract the guards to take the initiative to attack like he did now. It was just that when he happened to encounter the guards would attack the player. At this time, although this group of guards came for Gu Fei, when they saw the mages on Shady Grove City's side with PK value of 20+, they had to make a move. The first mage who was knocked down by the guard's sword didn't die, but was captured alive. This was in line with the PK rules. In the rules, only players with PK value of 30+ would be killed on the spot. As for those with PK value of 20 to 30, they would be taken back to prison, and there would also be a 2-level penalty. With PK value of 20+, it would be more than 40 hours in prison, and they would also lose 2 levels. It sounded more terrible than losing 5 levels for 30+. The faces of the mages in Shady Grove City with PK value over 20 changed, and they wanted to escape without saying goodbye to the others. However, in this kind of situation, the guards would chase after them. How fast could an ordinary mage be? As soon as the guards started running, everyone knew that they definitely wouldn't be able to escape. In the end, it was only because of the guild quest that he had accumulated so many PK points. Even though he was facing the system, the other players didn't have the heart to just stand by and watch. Run! Some of them suddenly had an idea. They let the mages pass and stood in a straight line, shoulder to shoulder. They thought to themselves, I'm not going to fight the guards. I'm just blocking the way, and the stupid system NPCs can only take a detour. In the end, the guards were even more dumbfounded than them. They simply ignored the human wall in front of them and continued running. Of the 2 players it collided with, one was sent flying and the other was stepped on. The guard didn't mind at all and continued to chase. Trap! Set the trap! Someone shouted. Several ambushers quickly set up traps on the ground. The mage heading this way obviously went around the trap, but the system's character wasn't that smart. It stepped right into the trap. Ha! Just as everyone was pleasantly surprised, they heard a pala sound. The trap that the guard had stepped on was already smashed to pieces. It didn't have any effect at all. Gu Fei wasn't unfamiliar with this situation. When Remnant Dream died in the trap set by those guys, it had the same effect when she was stepped on by the werewolf. The difference in levels was truly an insurmountable chasm in the game. In the end, none of the mages in Forest Inn were spared. They were all captured alive by the guards. Gu Fei was happy watching this. He didn't forget that he was the main character. While the mages in Forest Inn hid here and there, they lured away some of the pursuers, but the majority were still gathered on the streets. At this time, they had already reached Gu Fei's position. Just as Gu Fei was thinking about how these guys were going to get onto the roof, the captain of the guards suddenly lowered his body and leaped into the air. The soil beneath his feet splashed everywhere, making him look like a mud jet. He raised the greatsword in his hand above his head and flew over the roof. Then he swung the greatsword down towards Gu Fei. Earth-shattering slash! Some of the more knowledgeable players shouted. Earth-shattering slash was a warrior skill that had appeared in the game's promotional video. People like Child Elite Group and Unsworn Sword, who had seen these guards in action, were once again confused. Were these people knights or warriors? They were too versatile. Although this slash came with shocking momentum, Gu Fei's reactions were never slow. He hurriedly jumped to the side and dodged it. However, the opponent didn't stop. He landed on one knee and the sword slammed into the roof. Dust flew everywhere. This slash almost pierced through the roof. Gu Fei felt the ground under his feet shake. His health dropped by a chunk. Although this earth-shattering slash didn't directly hit Gu Fei, it still dealt damage. In game terms, this attack had an AoE effect. If Gu Fei didn't have Windchaser's protection, this AoE attack would have instantly killed him. If this slash had landed on his head, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Facing such a strong opponent, Gu Fei didn't retreat. As soon as the opponent got up, Gu Fei shouted, "Dual Flame Flash," and returned the slash. In the end, Gu Fei's Dual Flame Flash, which had never failed before, broke the record today. The opponent raised his left arm and raised his shield, easily blocking Gu Fei's slash. Dual Flame Flash left a streak of light on the shield. It flashed and disappeared, looking extremely small. The opponent's movements weren't slow. Moreover, his reaction speed was controlled by a machine. With just this slash, Gu Fei realized that defeating this guard captain would be a bit troublesome. To deal with a system character, Gu Fei had two methods. The first was to be faster than the opponent. That way, even if the opponent had the awareness to dodge, they wouldn't be able to deal with an attack that was faster than the opponent. The second method was to figure out the opponent's attack pattern and then target it. At the moment, the first plan was obviously not feasible. This guy, who was not sure whether it was a warrior or a knight, had a shield protecting its body, and its defensive area was very large. In addition, it was impossible for Gu Fei to be careless in the slightest. It was too difficult for Gu Fei to cut it. As for the second method, it wasn't the time. Because after the guard captain took the lead, the other guards all started to jump onto the roofs, using the skill Earth-Shattering Slash. If he was hit by this AoE attack, Gu Fei's life would be gone. He didn't even have time to run, so he hurriedly used teleportation to teleport 5 meters away. The guard captain once again took the lead and charged forward. Gu Fei flipped to the right and jumped onto the street from the rooftop, running away. Looking back, he saw that the opponent had jumped down from the rooftop and continued to chase him. There were also people on the rooftops who had put away their swords and shields. Fuck! All the players went crazy again. It turned out that these guards weren't just warriors and knights, they were also fucking archers. After dodging an arrow, Gu Fei began to run along the wall, causing the enemy to lose their target. However, the pursuers behind him didn't give up. Their speed didn't seem to be any slower than Gu Fei's. These guys had speed, strength, and skills from all classes. Usually, only the main characters in online novels would have such a cheat. However, in the parallel world, before the players could achieve it, the NPCs in the system had already achieved it. Gu Fei looked back as he ran, only to see the opponents chasing him at an orderly pace. Gu Fei felt that it was a pity. If the opponents were only chasing him, he would have stopped and patiently competed with them, but there were too many of them. After all, these guards were here for Gu Fei, and the 20+ mages who had escaped were sent to chase 1 or 2 people. It was too naive of Gu Fei to think that he, as the main character, would receive such treatment. The players' gossipy mentality was also reflected at this time. Many people actually continued to chase after him. For example, Water Depth, the many archers under Water Depth, Slender Waist Dance, and Yutian Shenming in Cloud City. In short, they were all people with speed. With the previous example of his trap being directly stepped on, Gu Fei didn't use his electric wall to stop them. If he saved this bit of mana, he could use 2 more teleportation to close the distance. As he ran, Slender Waist Dance, Yutian Shenming, and so on, people he knew even messaged Gu Fei to ask what his plans were. Gu Fei didn't have the time to reply to their messages. He ran along the street all the way to a large courtyard in front of him. On the wall of the courtyard, there was a relief of a bow and an arrow. It was the city's archer range. Gu Fei didn't think about rushing in. "I'm going offline first, see you tomorrow." Gu Fei used this last bit of time to send a message to the group. With a flash of white light, he went offline. Fuck! The players who were chasing after him felt depressed. This was the first time in history that a player with a PK value of 30+ had actually gone offline in such a despicable way. This was like watching a movie without an ending. It was too infuriating. The main city guards lined up and left the moment Gu Fei went offline. The players stayed behind to continue condemning Gu Fei's unkind behavior. Suddenly, everyone let out a strange cry. In an instant, the players split into 2 lines, each standing on the left and right side of the street. A few minutes ago, everyone was fighting to the death. A few minutes later, they were standing together and watching the show. How could they do this? Everyone calmed down. Water Depth stood up and said, "We're also doing a quest. There's no target here. There's no need to fight and kill." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand and scattered a handful of white lime. In an instant, a thief appeared in the middle of the street, approaching Water Depth. "Miss, why are you doing this?" Water Depth laughed. "Stop talking nonsense. Go die." The girl suddenly rushed over with a dagger in her hand. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.